You have been operating blindly at a level of power that most people do not even suspect exists. The most profound traditions taught nothing new. They merely reminded us that you are the source. This text unearths that truth, buried beneath the noise of the system. Life does not happen to you. You emanate it. Chapter by chapter, we will demolish the illusion of the impossible. Prepare to reclaim your place as the active architect of a reality that until today you believed governed you. Chapter 1. The noise that prevents you from hearing. There's a thought experiment worth doing right now as you hold these pages. Stop, breathe, and ask yourself with brutal honesty, how many of your thoughts today did you deliberately choose, and how many just appeared, drifting over you like leaves in the wind? Most people, when they ask this question honestly, discover something uncomfortable. They aren't thinking, they are being thought about. Their minds are running programs installed decades ago, repeating patterns learned in circumstances that no longer exist, generating emotional states that have no relation to their actual present. And from those states, they are constructing their reality. This is the starting point for everything we will explore together. Not the abstract theory that everything is energy, a phrase so often repeated it has almost lost all meaning, but the practical and operational understanding of why your current life is exactly a reflection of the frequency from which you have been operating most of the time without knowing it. In the study of human behavior, there's a concept called automaticity. It refers to the brain's ability to execute complex patterns of thought, emotion, and action without any conscious effort, much like driving a car without thinking about each steering wheel movement. This ability is an extraordinary evolutionary gift. It frees up cognitive resources for new tasks. But it has a dark side that almost no one examines. When the patterns that become automatic are limiting, when the programs running on autopilot are based on fear, scarcity, or indignity, that same automaticity works against you with devastating efficiency. Think about Andres. Andres was 38 years old, had a stable job, and a life that from the outside seemed reasonably orderly. However, for a decade, he'd had the persistent feeling that something wasn't right. He worked diligently, but he never managed to progress at the pace he felt he should. His relationships always reached a point where he, without fully understanding why, began to distance himself. His personal projects gathered dust in a drawer. Every year he started with resolutions and ended with the same frustrations. When Andres began to observe his thought patterns with the same objectivity an engineer uses to examine a malfunctioning system, what he found wasn't a lack of talent or effort. He found a constant background noise he had never identified for what it was, an ingrained programming that essentially said true success was for others, not for him. He didn't think it consciously, no one would, but the pattern demonstrated it with a consistency that left no room for other interpretation. The noise that prevents you from hearing isn't always external. Sometimes it's the internal chorus of voices that endlessly repeat the story of why things are the way they are and always will be. And that chorus doesn't shout, it whispers. And in that constant whisper lies the root of most human stagnation. Metaphysics, in its most honest and unadorned definition, is the study of that which lies beyond the physical, but determines the physical. It is not a belief system that requires blind faith. It is a framework of understanding that states, before anything manifests on the visible plane, it was first a frequency on the invisible plane. Before the building, there was the plan. Before the plan, there was the vision. Before the vision, there was the architect's inner state. Your inner state is the architect of your reality, not the only factor, because we live in a world of complex interactions where many forces converge. But it is the factor you have the greatest capacity to influence. And, paradoxically, it's the one most people never seriously examine. The first step in changing any system is understanding how it works. Not to judge it or feel guilty about its current results, because guilt is just another form of pent-up energy that perpetuates the problem. But to see the mechanism clearly enough to be able to intervene intentionally. Your system operates across 3 levels that constantly influence each other. The level of thought, where habitual patterns of interpretation determine what you perceive. The emotional level, where the energetic charge accompanying those thoughts determines their creative power. And the level of identity, where fundamental beliefs about who you are determine what can enter your experience and what is automatically rejected. These 3 levels are not independent. They form an integrated system where each influences the others. A repeated thought generates a habitual emotion. A habitual emotion solidifies a belief. An established belief automatically generates the thoughts that confirm it. The cycle closes upon itself, and unless you consciously interrupt it, it will continue to produce the same results with the same fidelity that an apple seed produces apples and not oranges. Here's the game-changing news. That cycle can be broken. Not with brute willpower, not with empty affirmations, not with mechanical visualizations, but with a genuine understanding of its mechanisms and with the deliberate practice of alternative states. And that is precisely the journey this book proposes. Before moving on to the next chapter, take a genuine moment with this question. What is the background noise running in your mind most of the time? Not the noise you wish was running. The noise that actually is. Name it with the honesty it deserves. Because until you name it, you can't choose anything else. Reflection. What story about yourself and what's possible for you have you been repeating internally the longest? When was the last time you questioned whether that story is fact or simply a pattern that has become ingrained in you? Are you enjoying this information? Then don't forget that the first link in the description has more resources to help you continue growing. Chapter 2. Frequency. What you are. Before you speak. Imagine you walk into a meeting room where 10 people are already seated. Before anyone utters a single word, you already know something about the state of the room. There's a palpable tension, or there's a sense of relaxation. There's openness, or there's a sense of closure. You perceive it in your body before you process it in your mind. What exactly are you perceiving? Frequency. The collective energetic signature of everyone, present. This phenomenon requires no supernatural explanation. It is simply the perception of signals that your nervous system processes at a speed and level of detail that far surpasses your rational consciousness. Facial micro-expressions, breathing patterns, muscle tone, speech cadence, even electromagnetic fields generated by the human heart that extend beyond the physical body. Your system captures all of this simultaneously and transforms it into an impression that you experience as something in the air. Now apply this to yourself. Before you utter a single word, before you take any action, before you make any proposal or initiate any relationship, you are already transmitting a frequency. The state from which you approach each situation precedes and colors everything that follows. And that state, to a large extent, determines what you receive in return. Your personal frequency is not an abstract concept. It has measurable physical correlates. The state of your nervous system, whether it's in expansion or contraction mode. The pattern of your breathing, whether it's deep and rhythmic or shallow and irregular. the muscle tone of your body, whether it reflects openness or defense, your heart rate and its variability, which researchers have identified as one of the most reliable indicators of a person's emotional state. All of this forms part of the frequency you transmit. Carolina was a consultant at a well-known firm, technically brilliant, rigorously prepared, and possessing in-depth knowledge of her subjects. And yet, her proposals were rejected with a frequency that didn't reflect the quality of her work. When someone with an outside perspective observed her during a presentation, the reaction was immediate. Carolina entered the room in a state of barely contained anxiety. Her posture, her voice, her micro-movements conveyed a constant, implicit question. Am I good enough? Will they accept me? And those who received this signal unconsciously responded to it more than to the content of the presentation. Carolina's work wasn't about learning new presentation techniques. It was about transforming the internal state from which she approached each presentation. When she began to approach them with a calm certainty of her worth, not from arrogance, but from genuine confidence, the same content, presented in the same way, produced completely different results. The field had changed because the frequency that generated it had changed. Herein lies one of the most powerful principles of this book, one that deserves to be stated with absolute clarity. Effort without frequency alignment produces mediocre results, and frequency alignment with modest actions produces disproportionate results. This is not an argument for doing less. It is an argument for acting from a different state. What your default frequency is something you can begin to identify with a simple observation exercise. For one day, notice where you operate from in different contexts of your life. When you speak with your boss, what state of mind do you operate from? A sense of security or a fear of not being good enough? When you negotiate, what place do you come from? Confidence in the value you offer or a fear of losing? When you start something new, what energy do you draw from? Genuine enthusiasm or the pressure that it has to work? There are no right or wrong answers to these questions. There are only honest answers. And honesty, in this context, is the most creative act you can perform. Because once you see the state from which you operate, you have something you didn't have before. The ability to choose to operate from a different one. Frequency can be modulated. Not with superficial positive thinking, but with practices that genuinely change the state of the nervous system and the emotional field. Breathing is one of the most powerful because it is the only autonomous bodily process that can also be consciously controlled, creating a direct bridge between mind and body. Intentional physical movement is another. Music, silence, nature, genuine connection with other people, all are frequency modulators that operate at the system level, not just at the level of thought. What you're looking for isn't an artificial frequency of forced joy. You're looking for what wellness researchers call coherence, a state in which thought, emotion, and physiology are aligned, operating in the same direction without the dissonance generated by inner conflict. Coherence is, energetically, the state of maximum creative power. From this state, you not only think better, but you also perceive more, connect more deeply, and attract with an efficiency that, to those who don't understand the mechanism, seems like luck. It's not luck, it's alignment. Reflection. Choose 3 important contexts in your life, whether work, relationships, or personal projects. What predominant frequency do you bring to each one? Is there coherence between what you want to achieve in each context and the state from which you approach it? Chapter 3. Habitual thinking is your default destiny. The mind processes between 50,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day, according to behavioral researchers. Of those, approximately 90% are the same as yesterday's, and 90% are the same as the day before. This fact, when understood in its full implications, is simultaneously unsettling and enormously liberating. Unsettling because it reveals the scale of the mind's automatic operation. Liberating because it pinpoints precisely where the most impactful intervention lies. If your thoughts today are largely the same as yesterday's, and if those thoughts generate the emotional states they generate, and if those emotional states determine the actions you take and how you perceive and interpret available opportunities, then the logic is undeniable. For your reality to change significantly, your habitual thoughts must change significantly. Not your occasional thoughts, the habitual ones, the ones that run in the background uninvited. This is not the same as think positive. Positive thinking as a superficial mandate is about as effective as mopping up smoke without putting out the fire. The root of the problem lies in habitual thought patterns, and changing them requires something deeper than simply decorating the surface with motivational phrases. Marco had a thought pattern he described as realism. When someone presented an opportunity, his mind instantly generated a list of why it might not work out. When he himself contemplated something he desired, his immediate, habitual thought was to formulate reasons why it probably wouldn't happen. He interpreted this as intelligent precaution. What it really was, in energetic terms, was an automatic veto system that killed possibilities before they had a chance to develop. Marco wasn't a pessimist. He was someone who had developed a protective thought pattern against disappointment, and that pattern, repeated thousands of times, had become his default way of processing any possibility. Realism was, at its core, a self-protective mechanism against the risk of wanting something and not getting it. And that mechanism effectively protected him, both from disappointment and from any outcome that required inhabiting a state of openness and possibility. Marco's transformation began when he understood something fundamental. Habitual thoughts are not reality. They are patterns of processing reality, and these processing patterns can be changed. Not overnight, because the brain works through neural networks whose strengthening requires repetition and time. But it can be changed progressively, with a consistency that produces verifiable results. The mechanism by which habitual thoughts become predetermined has to do with what is known in neurology as Hebb's law, which simply states neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you repeat a thought pattern, the neural pathway that supports it strengthens. It becomes faster, more efficient, more automatic. And what is automatic seems inevitable. It seems just the way I am. But it's not who you are. It's how your brain has organized itself so far, in response to the thoughts you've most frequently entertained. And the brain, fortunately, isn't static. It has a capacity for reorganization that neuroscientists call plasticity, and it operates throughout life. It's never too late to establish new thought patterns. What it does require is time, repetition, and, crucially, emotional engagement, because emotion is the agent that accelerates neural consolidation. The practice of transforming habitual thinking doesn't begin with the thought itself. It begins with observation. Before you can change a pattern, you need to see it clearly. You need to notice it when it appears, not to condemn it or fight it, but simply to recognize it as a pattern and not as a truth. There's the thought that this isn't going to work. That thought is a pattern. It's not a fact. This simple act of naming and distancing, what cognitive psychology calls cognitive diffusion, has a transformative power that is disproportionate to its apparent simplicity. The moment you observe the thought, instead of fully identifying with it, a space is created. And in that space, the possibility of choice arises. Choose what? Not necessarily an opposing viewpoint, because the leap from one extreme to the other rarely holds up. Rather, choose an alternative, more open, more possibility-oriented viewpoint. Faced with the habitual thought of, "This isn't going to work," the alternative isn't, "This is going to work perfectly." It's, "I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm willing to find out." That single modification changes the energetic frequency of thought from closed to open. And openness, repeated often enough as a habitual state, creates the conditions from which results can emerge, that closeness, made impossible. Reflection. Identify the most limiting habitual thought pattern you recognize in yourself. Don't judge it. Simply ask yourself, where did it come from? When did it take hold? What protective function did it serve at the time? Is it still useful today, or has it run its course? Chapter 4. Emotion is the signature that authenticates your creation. In the world of legal documents, a signature changes everything. The same text without a signature is merely an intention. With a signature, it becomes a commitment, an agreement, a reality that holds power in the world. Emotion is precisely that signature in the process of creating your reality. Thought is the text. Emotion is the signature that authenticates it and gives it creative power. This is why thought alone, without emotion, produces slow and inconsistent changes. And it's also why people who feel intensely, even if they think less clearly, sometimes manifest more quickly than people who think with great precision, but from an emotionally neutral state. Emotion is the catalyst. Without it, the process is like a chemical reaction at room temperature, slow, inefficient, and unpredictable. Now, here's the nuance that transforms many people's understanding. Not all emotions are equivalent in their effect on manifestation. And the criterion isn't simply positive or negative, a categorization that, besides being reductionist, creates the problem of emotional repression we already mentioned. The real criterion is expansion versus contraction. Expansive emotions are those that, when you experience them, open your perceptual field, broaden the range of possibilities you can see and mobilize, and generate a physiological response of openness in your body. Genuine gratitude, real enthusiasm, love, deep peace, authentic joy. When you are in any of these states, you can literally see more options, connect more ideas, and access more creativity. Your nervous system is in expansion mode. Contractive emotions have the opposite effect. They close off the perceptual field, reduce the range of visible possibilities, and produce physiological responses of alertness or defense in the body. Chronic fear, persistent anxiety, deep-seated resentment, and profound shame are examples. In these states, the nervous system is in survival mode, and from that perspective, creativity, connection, and manifestation are structurally difficult. Paula was an entrepreneur who had spent 3 years building her business with unwavering determination. She worked harder than anyone else in her industry, was always available, and never turned down an opportunity. And yet, her business wasn't thriving as her dedication deserved. When she honestly examined the emotional state from which she operated most of the time, the answer was clear. Fear. Fear of failure, fear of disappointing those who believed in her, fear that all her effort would be in vain. That fear was the hallmark that authenticated every action, and the field responded to that hallmark. Every new initiative arrived imbued with the energy of survival, not expansion. The clients felt it. The negotiations reflected it. The results confirmed it. For Paula, the change didn't come from working more or learning new business techniques. It came from working on the emotional signature that accompanied her actions. Not by ignoring fear, but by acknowledging it, understanding it, and gradually replacing it as the dominant state with an emotion of confidence. Not blind, not forced, but grounded in the understanding that she had built real value and deserved to receive it back. When the emotional signature changed, the same efforts produced different results. Not because the external world had changed, but because the frequency with which Paula related to it had. A critical point about emotional authenticity: you can't force an emotion you don't feel and expect it to produce results. The system is too smart for that. When you try to generate artificial gratitude on a basis of real resentment or forced enthusiasm on a basis of genuine exhaustion, you create dissonance, and dissonance blocks the process. The goal isn't to act as if you feel something you don't. The goal is to create the actual conditions, both internal and external, that allow more expansive emotional states to genuinely emerge. Reflection. What is the dominant emotion driving your most important actions in life today? Is it an expansive or a contractionary signature? What would it take for that signature to genuinely, not by force, change? Chapter 5. Beliefs are the laws of your personal universe. There are physical laws that govern the universe: gravity, thermodynamics, electromagnetism. No one decides whether they apply or not. They simply are, and everything that exists operates within them. Your beliefs function in the same way within your personal universe. They are the laws that determine what is possible for you and what is not, what you can have, and what must remain out of your reach. What kind of people enter your life and what kinds of situations repeat themselves with a fidelity that defies coincidence. The crucial difference between physical laws and beliefs is this: physical laws are universal and unchanging. Beliefs are personal and changeable. But until you recognize them for what they are, you treat them as if they were physical laws. You treat them as facts about the nature of reality when they are, at their core, stories you learned to repeat until they felt true. A belief, in its most basic form, is a thought that you've so often repeated and emotionally charged that you no longer process it as a thought. You process it as truth. And the difference between these two categories is the difference between what is open to revision and what seems unquestionable. The most powerful beliefs, both those that expand your horizons and those that limit you, are instilled in the first years of life. Not because the adults around you intended to limit you. Most didn't. But because at that stage, the human brain operates in a state of almost total absorption, without the critical filter that develops later. A young child cannot evaluate whether what they hear is a universal truth or simply the conditioned perspective of an equally conditioned adult. They absorb it directly. They install it as code. That code, decades later, is still at work. It manifests as the invisible ceiling that prevents income from exceeding a certain level, as the pattern of relationships that always reaches the same breaking point, as the inexplicable resistance that appears precisely when the greatest opportunity knocks, as the inner voice that says, "Who am I to have that? That's not for people like me. If I get it, somehow I'll lose it." Sebastian was a high-level professional who had achieved everything his social circle considered success: position, recognition, stability. And yet, a persistent unease lingered within him, a feeling that something greater was calling to him, but consistently eluding him. When he explored this unease honestly, he discovered a belief as solid as a block of cement. True success involves loss. Behind this belief lay memories of figures in his childhood who, in achieving more, had paid a high price. Estranged families, deteriorating health, sacrificed happiness. Her subconscious mind had learned a lesson. More success equals more suffering. And with that law operating in her personal universe, every time she approached a higher level of achievement, the system activated the brakes. Not for lack of ability, but for the rigorous adherence to her own internal law. Identifying your limiting beliefs requires a kind of honesty that can be uncomfortable, because it involves acknowledging that many of the limitations you've experienced didn't come from the outside. They came from the rules you yourself established, even if you did so unconsciously and in circumstances that fully justified it. The most direct way to access a limiting belief is to trace a recurring pattern. If there's an area in your life where effort never seems enough, where results consistently fall short of what logic would dictate, where history repeats itself with variations in setting but the same essence, then a limiting belief is at work. The question that uncovers it is always the same. What would have to be true about me, about the world, or about how life works for this pattern to make sense? The answer that emerges from that honest question is your belief. Once identified, a belief can be challenged, not destroyed abruptly, because that rarely works, but gradually eroded with contradictory evidence, with questions that expose its contingency, with experiences that demonstrate that the story is revisable. Every small crack in the limiting belief creates space for possibility to enter. Reflection. Choose the area of your life where the results are most consistently less than what your effort and ability would suggest. Following that pattern, what underlying belief would have to be at work to produce that result so consistently? Where do you think that belief came from? Chapter 6. The Law of the Mirror. Your exterior reflects your interior. There's a phrase that circulates in many personal development contexts that has been so simplified and repeated that it barely makes an impact anymore. The outside reflects the inside. We hear it, we agree, and we move on without it truly sinking in. Because if it really did sink in all its implications, there would be no way to continue looking at our own lives in the same way. What this law says, in its full and honest version, is this: the circumstances, people, and experiences that make up your current reality are not random. They are not solely the product of external forces over which you have no influence. They are, to a significant degree, a reflection of your dominant energetic state, your deepest beliefs, your most habitual emotions, and the image you have of yourself and the world. This doesn't mean you're responsible for everything that happens in your life in the sense that you deliberately caused it. It doesn't mean the injustices of the world are the fault of those who suffer them. It's not a reverse victim-culprit philosophy. It's an understanding on a more subtle level that what we experience most consistently in life carries the energetic imprint of who we are, and that when we change who we are at a deep level, what we experience changes. Elena had spent years working in toxic environments. Bosses who belittled her, colleagues who excluded her, power dynamics that diminished her. Every time she changed jobs, hoping to find something different, the pattern repeated itself with astonishing consistency in the new settings. If it had been a coincidence, it would have happened once or twice. By the fifth repetition, in completely different contexts, the only constant was Elena herself. When Elena stopped looking for explanations in others and began to examine what she was projecting into her professional relationships, she discovered something difficult to accept. She had long held the belief that she wasn't entirely deserving of respect in professional settings. This belief generated a defensive and slightly apologetic energy that others unconsciously perceived and reacted to. The mirror was brutally accurate. Eleanor's job wasn't to learn how to handle difficult people. It was to change the message she was sending. When she did, when she genuinely began to operate from a place of certainty about her professional value, the dynamics of her work relationships began to shift. Not every environment magically transformed, but her way of interacting with others changed. Her responses to being undervalued changed, and gradually, the kinds of opportunities and relationships she attracted also changed. The law of the mirror has implications in every area of life. In finances, your current bank statement reflects, among other things, your energetic relationship with money. Not absolutely, because the socioeconomic context matters. But within any context, some people prosper and others don't, even with similar resources. And the difference often lies in the internal state from which they relate to abundance. In relationships, the people you consistently attract reflect the state of your relationship with yourself. If you're constantly attracting people who don't value you, the uncomfortable question is, to what extent are you undervaluing yourself? If you always end up in rescue or dependency dynamics, what is it in your environment that's inviting this? These questions aren't meant to assign blame, but rather to pinpoint the real point of intervention. And that point is always internal. Always. Because the external world, by definition, is beyond your control. The internal world, with practice and awareness, is within you. The mirror doesn't lie. It's not against you. It simply does its job with perfect fidelity. And when you learn to read what it shows you, instead of reacting to it, it becomes the most honest and accurate teacher you can have. Reflection. Identify a recurring pattern in your relationships or external circumstances. Without looking for external blame, ask yourself, what internal state, belief, or frequency might be generating this consistent reflection? What is the mirror telling you that you haven't yet wanted to hear? Chapter 7. Let go of control to reclaim. Power. There's a paradox at the heart of conscious creation that confuses many people until they fully grasp it. The excessive effort to control outcomes is often the biggest obstacle to achieving them. Put another way, the need to control is a form of distrust in the process, and that distrust energetically blocks the channel through which what you seek would flow. This requires a distinction that is fundamental to avoid misinterpreting the principle. Letting go of control does not mean passivity. It does not mean indifference. It does not mean abandoning your goals and sitting back waiting for life to deliver them to you. It means distinguishing between what is within your sphere of influence, which deserves all your attention and energy, and what is outside of it, which deserves to be released with genuine trust that there is a greater intelligence than your own operating in that space. What lies within your influence, your inner state, the frequency from which you operate, the actions you take, the thoughts you nurture, the emotions you cultivate, the beliefs you choose to examine and transform. All of this is yours. It is the domain where your energy is most effective. What lies outside your influence, the exact moment something materializes, the specific way it will arrive, the actions of other people, external circumstances moving outside your direct field. Trying to control this is like trying to control the weather with positive thinking. It drains your energy, generates frustration, and, paradoxically, creates tension in the field that hinders manifestation. Bernardo was a man of intense action. When he wanted something, he pursued it with all the force of his determination. He planned every step, anticipated every obstacle, and built plans B, C, and D. His drive to control was formidable. And paradoxically, the harder he squeezed, the more what he sought seemed to slip through his fingers. The most important negotiations in his life failed at the very moment he pushed the hardest. The relationships that mattered most to him became strained precisely when he tried hardest to secure them. What Bernardo didn't understand was that his controlling energy, in its essence, transmitted a signal of distrust. Distrust in the process, distrust in other people, distrust that the universe could arrange the conditions without him forcing everything. And this distrust, perceived by everyone involved in his processes, generated a natural resistance within the field. The turning point in Bernardo's story came when, for the first time in decades, circumstances forced him to let go. A health issue kept him away from his business for several months. During that time, with his ability to control drastically reduced, several of the situations he had been trying to force began to resolve themselves with an ease he found inexplicable. Not because he had ceased to matter, but because his lack of control had stopped blocking the process. The trust this principle invites us to cultivate is not the blind faith of someone lacking judgment. It is the operational trust of someone who understands that there are dimensions of the process that neither need nor can be controlled, and that letting go of them is not abandonment, but intelligence. It is the trust of the farmer who sows carefully, waters consistently, and then has the wisdom not to pull the seeds from the ground to see if they are growing. Letting go of control as a practice begins with honestly identifying the areas of your life where you're investing energy in trying to control things that are beyond your actual control. Once freed from this impossible task, that energy becomes available to invest in what you can influence: your inner state, the quality of your presence, and the frequency from which you operate. Reflection. In what area of your life are you using most of your energy to control what is outside your actual control? What would happen if you let go of that specific control and redirected that energy toward modulating your internal state? What kind of confidence would you need to develop to do so? Chapter 8. The Quantum Field of Possibility. There is a state that physicists describe as superposition, a subatomic particle that, until the moment of observation, exists in multiple possible states simultaneously. Only when it is observed does it collapse into a defined state. This phenomenon, which operates at the subatomic level, has implications that extend to the level of human experience in a way that deserves to be explored without resorting to oversimplification. What this principle suggests, when applied to lived reality, is that the field of possibilities surrounding you at any given moment is vastly richer than your usual perception allows you to see. Your current reality is not the only reality available. It is the reality that has been filtered from the field of possibilities through your consciousness, your beliefs, and your expectations. This isn't mysticism. It's the recognition that the reality you perceive is conditioned by the observer who perceives it. And when the observer changes, when your beliefs, expectations, and emotional states transform, the reality you perceive, and with it the one you can create, also transforms. Julia had been looking for a job for 9 months. She applied to the same categories, presented herself the same way, and expected the same kind of response. And she got the same results: silence or rejection. Her field of possibilities, from her perspective, was narrow and barren. Not because opportunities didn't exist, but because her anxious search, fueled by beliefs about her market value, actively filtered out anything that didn't confirm that narrative of scarcity. The turning point came when Julia, almost by accident, allowed herself to explore a completely different direction than the one she had been pursuing. A casual conversation with someone in an unexpected context opened up a possibility that her narrowed perceptual field would never have intentionally generated. Within weeks, her work situation was transformed. Not because the world had changed, because her openness to the field of possibilities had. The quantum field of possibilities doesn't respond to the linear logic of cause and effect that the rational mind prioritizes. It responds to the frequency of the observer. When you observe from a place of fear, the field reflects back confirmations of that fear. When you observe from a place of openness and trust, the field can reveal possibilities that were literally invisible from your previous state. This has direct, practical implications. The first is the importance of deliberately expanding the range of what you consider possible. Not capriciously or irresponsibly, but by genuinely questioning the boundaries you take for granted. Why does it have to be this way? What possibilities exist if I remove this assumption? What could be true that I haven't yet considered? The second is the importance of cultivating states of genuine openness, moments when the mind becomes still enough to perceive signals from the field that habitual noise blocks. Intuitions, flashes of inspiration, meaningful coincidences. All are communications from the field of possibilities. But you only perceive them when you are in a state of sufficient stillness and openness to receive them. The field of possibilities is not a place you travel to. It is the state from which you operate when you let go of the need for things to be only the way you have known them until now. Reflection. In what area of your life have you been searching within a very narrow field of possibilities, defined by what you know or what you have experienced before? What would happen if you genuinely opened up the question of what other possibilities might exist outside of that familiar field? Chapter 9. Gratitude as a technology, not as courtesy. Gratitude has been so domesticated by the discourse of superficial well-being that for many people, it has lost its true nature as a tool for transformation. It has become an exercise in good spiritual habits, filling out a journal, repeating 3 good things before going to sleep, saying thank you more often. All of this has value, undoubtedly. But it falls far short of capturing the true power of gratitude when practiced in its deepest dimension. Gratitude, understood as a transformative technology, operates on a level far beyond polite appreciation. It functions like a frequency tuner, capable of shifting your emotional state from contraction to expansion with an efficiency unmatched by any other practice. When you experience genuine gratitude, not the recited kind, but the felt kind, measurable physiological changes occur in your system. Your heart rate pattern is altered, your brain chemistry changes, and regions associated with well-being and openness are activated. Your nervous system shifts from threat mode to expansion mode. And from this state of expansion, perception changes. Possibilities that were previously invisible become visible. Connections that were blocked open up. Ideas that couldn't emerge from a state of scarcity or fear appear with a fluidity that seems almost magical, but has a perfectly functional explanation. The state has changed, and with it, the perceptual field that determines what you can see and create. Martina was going through one of the most difficult periods of her life. A real economic crisis, a broken relationship, and a feeling that the ground had shifted beneath her feet. In that context, the suggestion to practice gratitude sounded almost disrespectful to her pain. Gratitude for what, exactly, when everything seemed to be falling apart? What Martina discovered, with completely understandable initial resistance, is that gratitude doesn't deny pain or hardship. It sustains it from a different place. She began, not with grand pronouncements of gratitude, but with the smallest, most undeniable details. The warmth of the sun on her skin, the ability to breathe, an honest conversation with someone who loved her, the fact that she could still move, think, and choose. Those small acts of genuine recognition didn't solve her financial crisis overnight, but they changed the perspective from which she approached it. And from that different perspective, she began to see options that her despair had blocked. She began to act from a place of openness instead of contraction, and the results gradually began to reflect that difference. Gratitude as a technology also has a forward-looking dimension that is especially powerful. It's not just about being grateful for what already exists, but about being grateful in the present tense and with genuine emotion for what has not yet materialized, but what you trust is coming. This practice, which may feel strange at first, is essentially the act of energetically affirming that what you seek is already on its way. It's about inhabiting, in the present moment, the frequency of receiving before the reception becomes evident. This is not self-deception. It is alignment with a dimension of the manifestation process that linear logic cannot capture, that visible reality follows energetic reality, and that cultivating the frequency of reception, including gratitude for what is to come, accelerates the materialization process. Reflection. Beyond the gratitude exercises you already know, is there something in your life right now, something small and undeniable, for which you could feel genuine gratitude? Not gratitude for what should be, but gratitude for what already is. What changes in your state of mind when you focus on that for a few minutes? Chapter 10. Identity. The mold that determines the form. Everything has a form, determined by the mold that contains it. Water takes the shape of its container. Molten metal takes the shape of the mold into which it is poured. Light takes the direction of the lens that channels it. In the process of creating your reality, your identity is that mold. It determines the form that the experiences that enter your life take, the level you can reach, the type of relationships you can maintain, and the quality of life you can inhabit. And here's the turning point. Most people try to change their reality by working at the level of results, which is like trying to reshape solidified metal with your hands. The only time the shape can be changed is when the metal is molten, when identity is in a fluid state, receptive to a new configuration. Identity is not fixed. Even if it feels that way, even if the system defends it as if it were. Identity is a set of consolidated stories about who you are and what is possible for you. And stories, however old and solid they may seem, can be revised, expanded, and rewritten. The process of identity expansion has 4 stages that occur not necessarily in a linear order, but rather in a spiral. The first is recognition, clearly seeing who you currently are in terms of identity, not who you aspire to be, but who you believe you are. The second is questioning, examining the foundations of that identity. Where does it come from? What experiences solidified it? Is it an identity you chose or one that was assigned to you? The third is expansion, beginning to inhabit, even if only experimentally, an expanded version of your identity. Not pretending to be someone you're not, but allowing yourself to be more than you have allowed yourself to be until now. The fourth is consolidation, sufficiently repeating the thoughts, emotions, and actions consistent with the expanded identity until the new mold is established. Federico was someone who had identified himself throughout his adult life as an employee. When others spoke of entrepreneurship, he listened with curiosity, but with the detachment of someone observing a world that doesn't belong to him. I'm not that kind of person. That declaration of identity wasn't an objective description of his abilities. It was the mold within which he contained his own potential experience. The day Federico began to wonder, what if I, too, were the kind of person who could forge my own path? He didn't say it with conviction. He said it as a hypothesis, as an open question. But that very openness created a crack in the old mold. And through that crack, information, opportunities, and perspectives began to seep in. Opportunities that his identity filter had previously blocked automatically. Expanding your identity doesn't require a dramatic, transformative event. It requires a consistent willingness to inhabit questions rather than fixed answers about who you are. What if that were possible for me too? What part of this limited identity did I choose, and what part did I simply inherit? Who would I be if I didn't have this story about what I can and can't be? These questions don't destroy identity. They expand it, and a larger mold can contain a larger life. Reflection. What identity statements do you most often use to describe who you are and what is possible for you? Choose one that you feel limits you. When did you first adopt it as truth? What expanded version of that identity would you begin to inhabit if you allowed yourself to release the limiting story? Chapter 11. Intention. The helm of your energy. A ship without a rudder can have the most powerful engine in the world and still end up anywhere but its destination. Human energy works the same way. You have extraordinary creative capacity, but without clear and genuine intention, that capacity scatters in 1,000 directions, generating movement but no real progress on what truly matters. Intention, in the profound sense we understand it here, is not a goal written on paper. It is not a vague wish formulated in general terms. It is a fundamental orientation of energy toward a specific purpose, held with emotional clarity and the inner conviction that this purpose is valid, possible, and worthy of the investment of your most powerful energy. The difference between a superficial intention and one that acts as an effective rudder lies in the accompanying authenticity. When someone declares an intention disconnected from their deepest truth, when the desire stems from comparison with others, or a need to prove something, the energy it generates is fragmented. Part of it is directed toward the declared intention. Another part is directed toward the internal resistance created by the disconnect between desire and authenticity. Authentic intention, on the other hand, generates coherence. The entire system points in the same direction. Thoughts that align with it become more frequent. Emotions that support it are strengthened. Actions that stem from it feel natural rather than forced. And the field responds to that coherence with an efficiency that seems out of proportion to the effort invested. Valentin had been saying for years that he wanted to change careers. He mentioned it in conversations, wrote it in his annual goals, and affirmed it in his morning visualizations. And yet, nothing changed. The reason was that his stated intention wasn't authentic. It was, at its core, an escape from something he disliked rather than a genuine move towards something that ignited him. An intention based on rejecting what exists carries a completely different energy than an intention based on attracting what could be. The day Valentin asked himself a different question, not "What do I want to escape from?" but "What do I want to move towards?" the quality of his intention changed radically. A direction emerged that generated genuine enthusiasm, not just theoretical relief. And from that authentic intention, the steps began to unfold and be taken with a naturalness that the previous years of forced effort had failed to produce. Intention also acts as a filter for attention. Once you establish a clear and genuine intention, your reticular activating system, the neural network that determines what information from your environment reaches your consciousness, begins to bring relevant information into your perceptual field that previously went unnoticed. You start to see opportunities, connections, and resources that were always there, but that your lack of clear intention made invisible. This is what many people describe as synchronicities. They are not coincidences, but the result of your intention tuning your perception to a specific frequency of information. Setting a genuine intention requires time for silence and honesty. You can't rush it or manufacture it. It emerges from genuine contact with what matters most to you, with what, when you imagine it realized, generates a profound sense of recognition in your body, rather than mere intellectual approval. That response of recognition, that bodily resonance with the possibility, is the most reliable indicator that you have found an authentic intention. And an authentic intention is the most powerful rudder you can install on the ship of your creative energy. Reflection. What is the most important intention you are currently holding in your life? Examine it honestly. Does it stem from a genuine desire to move towards something that expands you, or does it stem from a desire to move away from something you dislike? What would change in the quality of your energy if you reframed that intention from authentic attraction rather than avoidance? Chapter 12. Silence, where the frequency is recalibrated. In an age of constant stimulation, silence has become something many people actively avoid without knowing exactly why. Every potential moment of pause is immediately filled. The phone, the music, the podcast, the TV playing in the background, the conversation that wasn't meant to happen at that moment. This flight from silence isn't accidental. It's the result of silence confronting us. It forces us to listen to what lies beneath the noise. And what lies beneath the noise is often precisely what we most need to hear, and also what we've been most avoiding. Silence, in the context of conscious creation, is not simply the absence of sound. It is the state in which the mind sufficiently reduces its habitual activity for more subtle signals from the field to emerge. It is the space where the intelligence operating beneath conscious thought can communicate. It is the place where energetic recalibration occurs naturally, effortlessly, without technique, simply through stillness. In acoustic physics, there is the phenomenon of sympathetic resonance. When a vibrating string is brought near another of the same pitch, the latter begins to vibrate without being touched. Inner silence works in a similar way. When you quiet the mental noise sufficiently, you begin to resonate with higher frequencies of the field that surrounds you. Intuition, genuine creativity, wisdom that comes not from analysis, but from direct knowledge. Ernesto was someone who proudly described his life as not a free minute. His schedule was a testament to his worth. Always busy, always productive, always available. What he didn't see was that this constant busyness was also a perfect system for avoiding the deepest questions his life was asking him. The silence was uncomfortable because in the silence, those questions emerged with no possibility of escape. When Ernesto first forced himself to spend 30 minutes a day in complete silence, no phone, no music, no external stimuli, the first few days were difficult. His mind raced, generating to-do lists, worries, and distractions. But gradually, with practice, he began to experience something he initially couldn't describe. A clarity that came not from thinking, but from the space between thoughts. Ideas arose without him summoning them. Insights into his life that constant activity had been blocking. Silence won't solve your problems directly, but it will put you in touch with an intelligence that, if you listen to it, can show you the path that the noise of habitual thought prevents you from seeing. It's the state in which the frequency naturally recalibrates, without deliberate intervention, simply through stillness that allows the system to return to its original state of coherence. The practice of silence doesn't require hours or perfect conditions. It requires consistency. 5 genuine minutes of real stillness every day have a cumulative effect on the quality of your inner state that far surpasses what any more elaborate technique can produce without that foundation of regular silence. Silence is where the frequency recalibrates, and a recalibrated frequency changes everything else. Reflection. When was the last time you were genuinely silent, without any external stimuli or directed mental activity, for at least 10 minutes? What do you avoid encountering in silence? What might be waiting to be heard there? Chapter 13. Visualization. That actually works. There's a version of visualization that doesn't work, and it's the most common. It involves imagining a desired outcome for a few minutes, without any real emotional investment, as if watching a pleasant but distant movie, and then expecting that mental image to produce results in the physical world. This version of visualization is basically fantasy without creative power, and that's why so many people practice it, don't get results, and conclude that it doesn't work. The kind of visualization that works operates on a completely different level. It's not a mental exercise. It's an emotional and neurological rehearsal of a reality that hasn't yet physically materialized, but is experienced internally with the same intensity as if it were already present. The difference isn't in the clarity of the image. It's in the depth of the accompanying internal experience. The human nervous system has a characteristic that is simultaneously its greatest vulnerability and its greatest resource. It doesn't accurately distinguish between a vivid imagined experience and a real lived experience. The same neural circuits are activated, the same physiological responses occur, the same chemistry is generated. Sports performance researchers discovered this decades ago. Athletes who practiced their discipline mentally with high emotional intensity improved their physical performance in measurable ways, almost as much as those who practiced physically. What this means for the process of creating your reality is extraordinary. You can begin neurologically installing the reality you desire before it physically manifests. You can create in your nervous system the grooves of experience, the emotional responses, the thought patterns, and the expectations of someone already living that reality. And when the internal system operates consistently from that state, the external one follows. Claudia wanted to expand her business to a level that her past experience didn't support. Every time she tried to visualize it in a conventional way, her rational mind immediately generated a list of why it was unlikely, and the visualization dissolved into doubt. What changed her approach was a simple yet transformative instruction. Instead of visualizing the outcome, visualize being the person who lives that outcome. Not what you would have, but who you would be. When Claudia focused on that, what that version of herself would think, what decisions she would make, how she would relate to challenges, from what emotional state she would operate, the resistance of her rational mind diminished noticeably. Because she wasn't asserting something that her system contradicted. She was exploring a possibility of identity. And that exploration, repeated consistently and with genuine emotional intensity, began to reorganize her internal system in ways that were gradually reflected in her external results. Effective visualization has 4 elements that distinguish it from mental fantasy. The first is sensory specificity, not just seeing the image, but hearing, feeling, smelling, inhabiting the experience with all available senses. The second is genuine emotional engagement, not feigning enthusiasm, but cultivating the real emotional state that would correspond to that experience. The third is first-person perspective. Not seeing yourself from the outside as in a movie, but living the experience from within as the protagonist. The fourth is regular practice, not as an occasional event, but as a daily practice that establishes and reinforces new neural patterns through repetition. There is also a dimension of visualization that goes beyond the specific outcome, visualizing the process. It's about imagining not only the destination, but also who you are along the way, how you relate to the obstacles that inevitably arise, what internal resources you use to face them, from what emotional state you navigate them. This dimension of the practice builds resilience and inner coherence, so that when real obstacles appear, the system already has a response in place instead of collapsing into habitual reactivity. Visualization is not a shortcut to results. It is an internal alignment tool that creates the conditions from which results can emerge organically and sustainably. Reflection. Choose an area where you desire significant change. Instead of visualizing the desired outcome, spend a few minutes visualizing who you would be if you were already living in that reality. What would that person think? How would they relate to challenges? From what emotional state would they operate? What does this exploration reveal about what you need to cultivate internally right now? Chapter 14. Resistance. Why you block what you want. There is a phenomenon that is deeply disconcerting for those who experience it without understanding it. The tendency to systematically sabotage progress toward what one most desires. The business that was about to take off and is suddenly abandoned. The relationship that promised depth and is fled the moment it becomes real. The project that was about to be completed and is postponed indefinitely. The opportunity that was awaited and, when it arrives, is declined with rationalizations that sound reasonable but are not entirely convincing. This is called resistance to success, and it's far more common than is publicly acknowledged, because admitting it means acknowledging something the ego finds difficult, that the most consistent obstacle on the path to what you desire is yourself. Not external circumstances, not the economy, not bad luck. You, operating from unconscious patterns that activate precisely when it matters most, if they don't. Resistance to success is not masochism or disguised laziness. It is the result of ingrained associations that connect achieving a certain level of success with consequences that the unconscious interprets as dangerous. And these associations, even if they have no validity in the present, operate with an efficiency that disregards conscious intentions. What kind of consequences might the unconscious mind associate with success? The possibilities are many and highly personal. Success might be associated with more responsibility than the system believes it can handle, with exposure to criticism and envy that proved painful in past experiences, with the loss of relationships with people who couldn't keep up with that level of advancement, with the implicit betrayal of a family or community of origin that operated on a different frequency, with the risk of failing at a higher level, which feels more costly than failing from the current standpoint. Manuel was an extraordinarily talented musician who had reached the threshold of real visibility several times in his career. And on each occasion, when the opportunity became concrete, something happened to dissolve it. Sometimes, it was an illness that struck at the most inopportune moment. Other times, it was a conflict with someone on the team. Other times, simply an inexplicable inertia. When Manuel honestly explored the pattern, he found the unconscious association that governed it. In his family of origin, standing out had been experienced as betrayal of the group. The message hadn't been explicit, but it had been consistent. Those who rise, rise and drift away, and those who drift away are lost. His subconscious, faithful to that program, activated the brakes precisely at the moment when rising became real. Not to harm him. To protect him from a consequence that his system interpreted as devastating: the loss of belonging. Working with resistance isn't about forcing progress while ignoring the unconscious signals. It's about engaging with them. It's about asking what they're protecting, what they need to feel safe and allow progress, and what new understanding could replace the old, outdated association. Sometimes resistance signals something genuinely important that needs addressing before moving forward. Sometimes it simply indicates the boundary of a comfort zone that needs expanding. The skill lies in discerning which is which, and that requires the kind of inner honesty most people avoid, precisely because the answer might be uncomfortable. Resistance is not your enemy. It's information. Read it as such. Reflection. Identify an area of your life where you consistently sabotage or slow down your own progress the moment success becomes real and concrete. What consequence of success in that area might your subconscious system be interpreting as a threat? What would need to shift in your understanding for that perceived threat to stop triggering the brakes? Chapter 15. Alignment. When your whole being points in the same direction. There are moments in life that are instantly recognizable, even if they're difficult to describe in words. Moments when everything seems to flow, when things fall into place with surprising ease, when action feels effortless despite the significant effort, when you have a sense that you're exactly where you're meant to be, doing exactly what you're meant to be doing. These moments aren't accidents or strokes of luck. They're the result of alignment, the state in which the different levels of your being are all pointing in the same direction. Alignment occurs when what you think, what you feel, what you believe, and what you do are in coherence. When there is no internal conflict between conscious desire and unconscious fear. When the action you take genuinely reflects the internal state from which you operate. When the identity you hold is consistent with the path you are walking. This state of holistic coherence is what generates that flow experience that performance psychologists have studied and that spiritual traditions have described as grace. The problem is that perfect alignment is an intermittent, not permanent state. Most of the time, we operate with some degree of misalignment, a discordance between what we want and what we expect, between what we say and what we feel, between the identity we aspire to embody and the one we actually inhabit in moments of pressure. And that misalignment is the source of most inefficient effort, energy expenditure, and inconsistent results. Leonora led a non-profit organization she had founded with genuine passion. But over time, administrative demands, funding pressures, and team dynamics had created a gap between the reason she had started it all and the day-to-day reality of her role. She continued to work with the same intensity, even more so. But the work felt heavy, where it had once been light, forced, where it had once been natural. Her results reflected this internal friction. What Leonora needed wasn't a new organizational strategy or a productivity coach. She needed to rediscover the alignment between her deepest purpose and the concrete actions of her daily life. When she began to honestly examine which parts of her work were genuinely aligned with what mattered most to her, and which had drifted into obligations that others expected of her, but that she herself didn't value, the reorganization that followed was radical. Fewer activities, more impact, less perceived effort, more real results. Alignment doesn't happen by declaration. It happens by tuning. Like a musical instrument that needs regular tuning. Your energy system needs frequent moments of honest examination about whether what you're doing genuinely reflects what matters most to you. Not at the level of external goals, but at the level of the deep why that gives meaning to everything else. The questions that facilitate alignment are simple, but require radical honesty. Does what I'm doing right now reflect what I genuinely value? Is the internal state from which I'm doing it consistent with the results I'm seeking? Is there a part of me sabotaging this because it doesn't truly agree with the direction? If I eliminated everything I do out of obligation, fear, or need for approval, what would remain? What remains after those honest questions is the core of your true alignment. And from that core, operating with genuine coherence, the energy you generate has a creative power that no amount of misaligned effort can match. Reflection. Examine the most important activities in your life right now. For each one, ask yourself, honestly, do I do it because it genuinely resonates with what I value most? Or do I do it out of obligation, fear, or a need for approval? What does this examination reveal about where you are aligned and where you are not? Chapter 16. The Art of Receiving. There's an asymmetry that many people don't recognize in themselves until someone points it out. They are extraordinarily capable of giving and extraordinarily clumsy at receiving. They give advice, they give help, they give time, they give energy, and when someone tries to reciprocate any of those things, they deflect, minimize, become uncomfortable, or outright reject it. This asymmetry is not a virtue. It's an energetic pattern that blocks the flow of abundance in their lives. The inability to receive has deep roots that vary from person to person. For some, it stems from an ingrained belief that receiving implies debt, dependence, or vulnerability. For others, it comes from a conviction that their needs are not as important as those of others. For still others, it's a distorted form of self-protection. If I expect nothing, I can't be disappointed. For others, it simply comes from discomfort with the momentary asymmetry of being the recipient of someone else's generosity. Regardless of the root cause, the energetic result is the same. A constant signal sent to the field saying no, thank you, I don't need it, I don't deserve it, or it's not comfortable for me. And the field, consistent as always, responds to that signal precisely. Abundance, in all its forms, cannot flow into a closed container. The metaphor of breathing is perfect here. Full breathing requires two movements, inhaling and exhaling. Someone who only exhales, who only gives, who only serves, who never receives, is only breathing halfway. And living at half one's respiratory capacity produces an existence where there is always enough to give to others, but never enough for oneself. Tomasa was one of those people everyone valued because she was always available, always generous, always at the service of those around her. And at the same time, she had lived for years in a state of economic and emotional scarcity that no one in her circle understood, because everyone saw her as someone who deserved so much more. What no one saw, and what she herself didn't acknowledge, was the consistency with which she rejected any form of receiving. She deflected praise. Gifts made her uncomfortable. She rejected help almost instinctively. She minimized recognition. Tomasa's work was to learn to receive with the same grace with which she gave, not as an exercise in social comfort, but as an energetic practice of genuine openness. She began small, receiving a compliment without deflecting it, accepting help when someone offered it, even if she didn't desperately need it, allowing others to give to her without immediately turning it into a debt to be repaid. Each small act of conscious reception was a signal sent out into the field. I am open. I am capable of receiving. The flow can circulate in both directions. Over time, and in ways she herself described as astonishing, abundance began to flow to her with a naturalness that her previous closed-off stance had blocked for years. Receiving is not passivity. It's the active half of the abundance cycle, and mastering it with the same intention you use to master giving is one of the most transformative practices you can incorporate. Reflection. Observe over the next few days how you respond when someone tries to give you something. A compliment, help, a gesture of generosity, recognition. Do you fully accept it, or do you deflect, minimize, or reject it? What belief about receiving or about your own worthiness is at play in that automatic response? Chapter 17. Divine Timing and Human Impatience. One of the most universal tensions on the path of conscious creation is that between the human desire for immediate results and the pace at which the field organizes the conditions for something to manifest in a sustained and aligned way. This tension, when not understood, generates one of the most effective ways to sabotage the process itself: impatience, which interrupts manifestation just before it is complete. Imagine a fermentation process. Wine needs time. You can't rush fermentation without ruining the wine. Bread needs the dough to rise. Interrupting that process at the wrong moment produces a dense, inedible result. The manifestation of complex and lasting realities operates with a similar logic. There is a process of organizing conditions, coincidences, and preparing people and circumstances that has its own rhythm, and that rhythm cannot be forced without consequences. This does not mean that action doesn't matter or that time is irrelevant. It means that there is a fundamental distinction between aligned action, which collaborates with the process and accelerates it, and anxious action, which disrupts the process due to a need to see immediate evidence that it is working. Renato had begun a business transformation process that, according to all internal and external indicators, was headed in the right direction. But after 6 weeks, seeing no visible financial results, he panicked and began changing his strategy, pursuing immediate results with actions that contradicted the original direction. The result was that he undid in days what he had built in weeks and had to start all over again from scratch. What Renato couldn't maintain was his trust in the process during the period of invisibility, that space between sowing and harvesting, where nothing seems to be happening on the surface, but where, underground, exactly what needs to happen is taking place. Impatience broke the process. Understanding timing in the context of manifestation requires distinguishing between two types of signs. Signs that the process is underway but hasn't yet reached its point of visible expression require patience and persistence. Signs that the direction is genuinely not working and needs to be revised require discernment and adjustment. Confusing the two is costly, giving up too soon on the first type or persisting without discernment on the second. The most reliable distinguishing criterion is not the external result, which may be slow due to timing rather than direction. It is internal consistency. Is the process I am following genuinely aligned with my deepest truth, my true values, and the direction my system recognizes as correct? If the answer is yes, then active patience is justified. If the answer is no, then a review is necessary. True patience isn't the passive resignation of someone waiting for things to change on their own. It's the active trust of someone who consistently continues to sow, water, and nurture the process, knowing that the harvest will come in its own time, not when anxiety demands it. Reflection. Is there a process in your life that you have interrupted or prematurely abandoned due to impatience? What would have given you the patience to continue? Right now, is there something you are tempted to abandon due to a lack of immediate results, when in reality, it simply needs more time and consistency? Chapter 18. Inspired action versus forced effort. There is a difference that those who have experienced it recognize immediately, and those who haven't may find hard to believe. The difference between action that flows from a state of inner alignment and action forced out of obligation or fear. It's not just a difference in subjective quality, in how it feels to do it. It's a difference in energy efficiency and in the results it produces. Forced action is what you take when you know you must, even though everything within you resists. It requires a disproportionate amount of energy to produce mediocre results. It generates cumulative wear and tear that eventually leads to exhaustion. And it produces results that, while technically adequate, lack that particular quality of work created from a state of genuine inner commitment. Inspired action is different in nature. It emerges from a state of alignment where inner drive and external direction are in harmony. It feels light even when the effort is significant. It generates energy rather than consuming it. And it produces results that often surpass what forced action could produce with double or triple the effort. This doesn't mean waiting indefinitely to feel perfectly inspired before taking action. That would be a trap of laziness disguised as spirituality. It means developing the ability to distinguish between resistance that is a genuine sign of misalignment and resistance that is simply the discomfort of growth in the face of something new or challenging. Mariana was a writer who had been stuck for months on a project that was deeply important to her. Every day, she sat down at her computer, determined to produce something. And every day, after hours of forcing words that refused to come out, she ended up exhausted with only a few pages that she knew weren't what the project deserved. The writer's block wasn't due to a lack of talent or dedication. It was a fundamental misalignment between how she was approaching the project and how the project needed to be approached. When Mariana stopped forcing it and began to ask herself what part of the project genuinely ignited her, not the overwhelming whole, but the next concrete step that sparked some glimmer of curiosity or enthusiasm, something shifted. The words she found from that state of less resistance were incomparably more vibrant than those she had forced for months. The practice of identifying inspired rather than forced action begins with a simple question you can ask yourself before undertaking any significant task. Is there any part of this that genuinely appeals to me or sparks my curiosity right now? If the answer is yes, start there. If the answer is no, the next question is, what would need to change in my internal state for any of this to become appealing? Sometimes it's a small reorientation of focus. Sometimes it's recognizing that the task needs to wait until your internal state is more conducive. Sometimes it's recognizing that the task itself is no longer aligned with your direction and needs to be removed from the equation. Inspired action is not perfect action. It is action that comes from the most aligned state available at that moment. And from that state, even imperfect actions produce real movement. Reflection. Think of an important task or project you're facing with resistance. Instead of asking yourself how to force yourself to do it, ask yourself, is there any aspect of this that genuinely interests or matters to me? What would it be like to approach it from that perspective rather than from a place of obligation? What changes in the quality of the action when you start from that place? Chapter 19. Relationships is a field of practice. No area of life reflects your frequency more faithfully or immediately than your relationships. Every bond you build, from the most intimate to the most peripheral, is a shared energy field that amplifies what you carry within. And that's why relationships are simultaneously the stage where conscious creation has the greatest impact and where unconscious patterns become most visible. The law of reflection operates in relationships with a precision that can be disconcerting. The people you attract repeatedly, the patterns that repeat themselves with different people, the types of conflicts that emerge time and again. All of this speaks to something happening within you, not just externally. This isn't meant to blame you, but rather to show you where the true point of transformation lies. If you consistently attract people who don't keep their promises, the energetic question isn't how to find more trustworthy people, although that matters too. The energetic question is, how trustworthy are you with yourself? How many commitments have you broken? A lack of integrity with yourself transmits a frequency that resonates with the same quality in others. If you constantly find yourself in relationships where you're not valued as you deserve, the energetic question isn't just how to choose better people. It's, how are you valuing yourself? From what level of real, not just declared but active, self-esteem are you choosing and maintaining these relationships even though they hurt you? Gabriel described himself as a magnet for toxic people. Every significant relationship in his life, romantic or platonic, eventually revealed the same pattern. People who took without giving, who crossed boundaries, and who left him feeling empty and resentful. His narrative was that he had bad luck with people. What a more honest look revealed was that he himself had no clearly defined or respected boundaries, and that his need for approval led him to tolerate behaviors that someone with greater inner strength would have rejected from the start. Gabriel's work wasn't about learning to identify toxic people. It was about strengthening his relationship with himself to the point where his energy field no longer resonated with the frequency of someone who accepts being treated without the respect they deserve. When that happened, the kind of people who naturally gravitated toward him began to change. Not because the world had changed, because he had changed, and his change altered the signal he emitted. Relationships are also a training ground in another fundamental sense. They offer the opportunity to practice, in real time and with the real consequences that only relationships produce, the qualities you are cultivating internally. Patience is not developed in isolation. Forgiveness is not practiced in the abstract. Honest communication is not perfected by reading about it. These qualities develop in real contact, with all the discomfort and friction that such contact entails. The relationships that challenge you the most are often the ones that have the most to teach you. Not because you should stay in harmful relationships in the name of growth, it's not that, but because the discomfort they generate, when examined honestly, points to something within you that needs to be addressed, transformed, or released. Reflection. Identify the most recurring and costly pattern in your important relationships. Without looking exclusively to others for the explanation, ask yourself, what internal state, unmet need, or belief about yourself or relationships might be contributing to this pattern repeating itself? What would change in your relationships if you first change that within yourself? Chapter 20. Money as neutral. Energy. Money is undoubtedly one of the topics that carries the most emotional and ideological weight in the collective human consciousness. It is also one of the areas where the gap between what people consciously desire and what they energetically project is widest and most costly. Few areas of life reveal the nature of a person's relationship with themselves and the world as clearly as their relationship with money. And the first fundamental understanding about this relationship is that money in itself is neutral. It is energy condensed into a form of exchange. It has no intrinsic moral qualities. It is neither good nor bad, spiritual nor anti-spiritual, corrupt nor pure. It is an amplifier that magnifies what already exists in its possessor. In the hands of someone who operates from generosity and clarity of purpose, money expands those qualities. In the hands of someone who operates from fear and a need for control, it amplifies those frequencies. The moral burden many people place on money creates an energetic contradiction that remarkably paralyzes the manifestation of abundance. They consciously want money because they need it and because it would allow them to do things they value. And at the same time, on a deeper level, they associate it with corruption, with a loss of integrity, with the kind of people they don't want to be. This energetic contradiction is like pressing the accelerator and the brake at the same time. Catalina was a brilliant therapist who genuinely helped her clients transform their lives. At the same time, she charged half the market rate, felt uncomfortable when anyone asked about her fees, and frequently made exceptions that cost her time and energy without any compensation. When she honestly explored this, she discovered an ingrained belief. Charging well to help someone is somehow exploiting them. Money and genuine service couldn't coexist in her mind. This belief not only harmed her financially, it created a subtle energy of resentment that affected the quality of her presence in the sessions. Because when you give your best work and receive less in return than it's worth, it inevitably creates a discord that interferes with the fullness of your commitment. Catalina's task was to separate the value of her service from the beliefs she had held about money. To recognize that being well compensated for work that genuinely transforms lives was not exploitation, but fair exchange. That the money she received was tangible recognition of the value she created, and that honoring that value financially was actually an act of integrity, not greed. When his internal relationship with money changed, his fees changed. And with them, interestingly, the quality of his relationships with clients also changed. Those who paid the true value of his work tended to be more seriously committed to the process. The result, on all levels, was superior. Your relationship with money reflects multiple layers of programming about your worth, about deservingness, about the relationship between effort and reward, about what people like you can and can't have, about what it means to be rich or poor in your family of origin and in your community. Examining these layers honestly and uninstalling those that work against you is one of the most profitable things you can do, in the most literal sense. Reflection. What is the phrase or thought that most automatically comes to mind when you think about money? Whether you're receiving it, asking for it, getting paid, or spending it. Where do you think that automatic response comes from? Is it working in your favor or against you? Chapter 21. Purpose as master frequency. There is a fundamental distinction in understanding conscious creation, one that separates the purely technical approach of getting what you want from the deeper approach of living from what truly matters. It is the distinction between goals and purpose. Goals are specific destinations, achieving a certain income, building a certain business, maintaining a certain relationship, attaining a certain position. Purpose is the frequency from which all those goals acquire or lose their true meaning. Goals without purpose produce a phenomenon that many successful people have experienced with bewilderment, reaching the pinnacle of what they set out to achieve and finding, instead of the expected fulfillment, a sense of emptiness they couldn't quite name. The achievement was there. The satisfaction, however, was not. Because the goals were real, but they were adrift without the anchor of a purpose to give them meaning. Purpose, as we explore it here, is not necessarily a grand mission or a sacrificial calling. It is simply the understanding of why, the honest answer to the question of what makes the effort, the risk, the discomfort of growth worthwhile. It is the core of meaning that gives direction to all creative energy. When you operate from a place of purpose, the frequency you emit changes qualitatively. It's not just higher in terms of emotional state. It's more coherent, more persistent, and better able to overcome the obstacles that dissolve motivation stemming from superficial desires. A person pursuing a goal out of fear of failure or a need for approval will give up at the first sign of serious resistance. A person pursuing that same goal with the clarity of a genuine purpose will find the internal resources to continue when external ones fail. Lorenzo had achieved all the conventional markers of success by the age of 42. His own company, recognition in his industry, and financial stability. And for 2 years, he had been navigating a growing feeling that something essential was missing, without being able to name it precisely. He was still productive, still fulfilling all expectations, but the energy he poured into it came from inertia and a sense of duty, not from any inner fire. Lorenzo's journey of exploring his purpose didn't yield an instant, dramatic answer. It was a months-long process of honest questioning that peeled back layers. What did he do in those moments when he lost track of time? What kind of impact did he derive from a satisfaction that no external achievement could match? What would he have done if money hadn't been a factor? The answers that emerged surprised him because they pointed in a direction he had never considered serious or compatible with his constructed identity as a pragmatic executive. The reorientation process wasn't about abandoning what had been built. It was about finding a way for what had been built to serve the emerging purpose. The business didn't radically change in its activities. What changed was the frequency from which Lorenzo operated it. And that different frequency transformed not only his subjective experience, but gradually the results the business produced. Purpose isn't a luxury you can indulge in once everything else is sorted out. It's the master frequency that determines whether everything you build has the strength and vitality to last. Reflection. If you knew for sure today that you had the resources to do anything, what would you do? Is there something in your life right now that when you do it, brings you a satisfaction that doesn't require external justification? How central is that something to the way you allocate your energy and time right now? I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you that if what you see here resonates with you, you'll find much more material to continue learning in the first link in the description. Chapter 22. Forgiveness as an act of energetic liberation. Forgiveness is probably the most misunderstood concept in any tradition that includes it, and also the most resisted. The resistance is understandable. Forgiving sounds like saying that what happened was okay, minimizing the harm done, giving the person who caused the harm a blank check to do it again. With that definition, resistance to forgiveness is completely rational. But that definition has nothing to do with what forgiveness truly is when understood in its energetic dimension. Forgiveness isn't saying that what happened was okay. It isn't reconciling with the person who caused the harm. It isn't exposing yourself to the same situation again. Forgiveness, in its energetic essence, is the act of releasing the burden of carrying resentment, anger, and pain that consume your energy in the present without affecting the person who caused them in the past. Resentment is, quite literally, reliving the experience. Every time you revisit a wound with the emotional energy of resentment, you re-experience the original event in your nervous system. Cortisol levels rise. Your nervous system goes into threat mode. Your energy field contracts. None of this happens to the person who hurt you, who may not even remember what happened. It only happens to you, in your present, building your current reality with that energy. In other words, resentment is an extraordinarily costly way of punishing yourself instead of the person who hurt you. And when you understand it in those terms, the motivation for letting it go changes completely. You don't let it go out of benevolence toward the person who hurt you. You let it go because carrying it is too costly for you. Beatrice had harbored intense resentment toward her former business partner for 11 years. According to her account, he had defrauded her both financially and personally in a project that had taken years of effort. The resentment was entirely understandable, given what had happened. And yet, it was the most significant factor preventing her energy from being directed toward building new possibilities. Every time she started something new, the lingering resentment filtered the experience with distrust, prevented her from forging new alliances, and consumed a quantity of mental and emotional energy that made everything more difficult. Beatrice's process of liberation was neither instantaneous nor linear. It began with the honest recognition that carrying that resentment was more difficult for her than for her former partner. It continued with the understanding that letting go was not the same as absolving, and it gradually progressed toward the act of, within herself, disconnecting the emotional burden of the past event without requiring her former partner to do or acknowledge anything. What Beatrice experienced when she genuinely began to let go was an unexpected release of energy. Not just emotional, but also creative and practical. Projects that had been stalled began to move forward. Decisions that had paralyzed her became clear. It was as if she had been running with an enormous weight on her back, and upon releasing it, the lightness of movement surprised her. Forgiveness is an act that takes place entirely within yourself. The other person doesn't need to be present or do anything. It's the decision to withdraw the energy you've been investing in keeping the wound alive and redirect it toward building your present and your future. Reflection. Is there any resentment you've been carrying that, when you honestly examine it, you recognize is draining energy you need to create what you desire? Not to justify the person who hurt you, but for yourself. How much longer are you willing to pay that price? Chapter 23. Consistency between what you think, say, and do. There is a form of energy drain that doesn't come from overworking or external circumstances. It comes from internal incoherence, from the gap between what one thinks, what one says, and what one does. This gap, when it persists over time, generates a level of energetic noise that consumes resources that would otherwise be available for creation. Consistency is not perfection. It doesn't mean that every thought, every word, and every action is perfectly aligned at all times, because that's humanly impossible. It means that the overall direction of all three levels points in the same direction, with enough honesty to recognize and bridge gaps when they become apparent. The most costly form of inconsistency is the one that exists between stated values and operational values. Stated values are what you say you possess: honesty, generosity, courage, creativity. Operational values are what actually guide your decisions when the stakes are high: comfort, approval, security, conflict avoidance. When there is a significant gap between the two, the system experiences a form of dissonance that manifests as anxiety, lack of direction, chronically low energy, or a feeling that life lacks coherence. Recognizing this gap isn't easy, because the ego has very sophisticated rationalization mechanisms that make decisions based on operational values seem justified by stated values. I didn't say what I thought because it wasn't the right time. when the truth is that I didn't want to risk conflict. I didn't undertake that project because the conditions weren't ideal, when the truth is that the fear of failure was more powerful than the commitment to creativity. The energy cost of sustaining these rationalizations is significant, and the way to reduce it is not through brutal self-criticism, but compassionate honesty. Recognizing the gap, understanding what legitimate need the inconsistency is serving, and exploring whether there is a way to address that need without sacrificing consistency. When someone lives in genuine coherence between what they think, what they say, and what they do, they radiate a quality that others perceive immediately, even if they can't articulate it: integrity. And integrity, in the energetic sense, is not just a moral quality. It is the state of being a whole system, without internal divisions that generate friction. From that state, energy moves with an efficiency and power that incoherence makes impossible. Reflection. Identify an area of your life where there is a gap between your stated values and your actual actions. Not to judge yourself, but to understand it. What legitimate need is this inconsistency serving? What would be different in your energy if you could honor that need in a way that is more consistent with what you truly value? Chapter 24. The body as an instrument of frequency. There is a dimension to energy work that purely mental or spiritual approaches tend to underestimate: the body. The body is not a passive vessel for consciousness, nor a dispensable vehicle for the spirit. It is the instrument through which frequency is generated, stored, expressed, and transformed. And to treat it as a secondary variable in the process of creating your reality is to leave out one of the most powerful resources you possess. Your body stores the history of your frequency. Chronic tension, habitual postures, breathing patterns, the way you move or stand, all of these are physical expressions of the emotional states you've held over time. And it works both ways. Just as your internal state produces your physical state can be intentionally used to modulate your internal state. This two-way communication is incredibly powerful as a practical tool. You don't need to wait until you feel high energy to adopt the posture of someone who does. You don't need to wait until you feel confident to move like someone who is. You don't need to wait until you feel powerful to breathe like someone who is. The body, intentionally engaged, can begin to generate the internal state you seek before that state emerges spontaneously. Behavioral researchers have documented this phenomenon in multiple contexts. Upright posture increases testosterone levels and reduces cortisol levels within minutes. Smiling, even when deliberate and not spontaneous, activates brain circuits associated with well-being. Slow, deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system and produces a measurable relaxation response. Your body doesn't wait for your mind to give it permission to change state. It responds directly to the physical stimuli you give it. Anna had been practicing meditation for years with what she described as inconsistent results. Her meditation sessions were mentally active but physically passive, and the experience of genuine stillness remained elusive. When she began to incorporate the body into her practice, conscious movement before meditation, deliberate attention to posture, and working with the breath as a gateway to the meditative state, the quality of her practice changed dramatically. The access to the inner silence she had been seeking became more consistent and deeper. The body is also the most reliable indicator of alignment. Before the mind can even articulate whether something is right or wrong, the body already knows. The tension in the stomach when faced with a decision that goes against your values. The lightness in the chest when something is genuinely aligned. The muscle tension in response to an interaction that isn't good for you. The body constantly speaks about the quality of your energetic alignment, and learning to listen to it is an invaluable skill. Treating the body as an instrument of frequency means giving it the attention it deserves, the movement it needs, the rest it requires, the nutrition that sustains it, the contact with nature that recalibrates it, not as abstract health obligations, but as the care you give to the most sophisticated instrument you will ever own. Reflection. What message is your body sending you right now? Where do you feel tension, contraction, or heaviness? What might that physical response be indicating about the state of your internal alignment? What intentional change in your physical state, whether in your posture, breathing, or movement, could begin to modulate that state right now? Chapter 25. Generosity as an accelerator of abundance. There's a paradox at the heart of abundance that runs counter to the logic of scarcity thinking. Giving from a place of fullness accelerates the flow of abundance back to you. Not as a transactional exchange mechanism, not the give-to-receive mentality that's really a sophisticated form of disguised accumulation, but as the natural outcome of what happens when a system operates from the genuine frequency of fullness instead of the fear of not having enough. Genuine generosity, the kind that comes from the joy of giving and not from obligation or the expectation of something in return, sends a signal to the world that says, "I have enough." And the world, responding to this frequency of sufficiency, tends to confirm it. This is the difference between someone who gives out of fear that there won't be more and someone who gives from the confidence that the flow is continuous. The former gives with the contraction of the one who loses. The latter gives with the expansion of the one who participates in a natural cycle. This is not an argument for economic naivete or indiscriminate generosity that disregards the giver's sustainability. It is the recognition that the way you relate to abundance, whether through defensive withholding or confident sharing, generates radically different frequencies that attract different results. Santiago was a professional who had achieved a comfortable financial position after years of hard work. Yet he operated from a state of chronic anxiety about money. He checked his accounts several times a day. He resisted any expense that wasn't strictly necessary. And the paradox was that the more intensely he tried to hold onto and control every penny, the more the feeling of scarcity overwhelmed him, regardless of the actual numbers in his account. What transformed Santiago's pattern wasn't any financial technique. It was beginning to give deliberately and consistently, initially in small amounts, from a conscious state of trust in the flow of money. Not because he expected a proportional return, but because each act of giving from a place of trust weakened the scarcity mindset that operated independently of his actual circumstances. The result wasn't that money magically appeared. It was that their internal relationship with abundance gradually changed. And from that changed relationship, their decisions about how to generate, invest, and use their resources became wiser and more aligned. And that wisdom, over time, produced financial results that their previous state of fear had made impossible. Generosity, as a spiritual and energetic practice, is not limited to money. It applies to attention, time, knowledge, recognition, and energy. Every time you give any of these things from genuine inner abundance, you strengthen the frequency of sufficiency that is the foundation of all lasting manifestation. Reflection. From what frequency do you give what you give in your life? Whether it's money, time, attention, or energy. Do you do it from a place of abundance or obligation? From trust in the flow or from fear that there won't be enough? What would change in your experience of abundance if you began to give, even in small amounts, consistently from the first of these frequencies. Chapter 26. Darkness as part of the process. There is a dominant narrative in many personal development and spirituality circles that does quiet but consistent harm. The idea that the path to a better life is a linear ascent from low states to higher states, and that if you experience darkness, doubt, collapse, or setbacks, something is wrong with you or your practice. This narrative is not only inaccurate, it is actively harmful because it turns the richest periods of learning into additional sources of shame and disconnection. The reality of the transformation process is spiral, not linear. You move forward, then there's a period of integration that can feel like a setback. You reach a level of clarity, and then life presents you with a challenge that seems specifically designed to destabilize what you thought you had resolved. You experience a period of expansion, and then comes one of contraction that can seem to erase all the previous work. This isn't failure. It's the natural rhythm of any genuine growth process. Darkness on the spiritual and energetic path has two fundamental functions that have no equivalent in periods of light. The first is to reveal what has not yet been integrated. When everything is going well and life flows, the deepest patterns remain invisible because there is no pressure to bring them to the surface. It is in moments of crisis, radical doubt, loss, or failure that the most deeply ingrained programs manifest themselves clearly enough to be seen and addressed. The second function is to create the root depth that makes sustained expansion possible. A tree growing in easy, windless soil has shallow roots. A tree subjected to storms develops roots so deep that no subsequent wind can move it. Periods of darkness, when consciously faced rather than avoided or denied, build a solidity in the psyche and energy field that periods of ease cannot produce. Ignacio had spent 3 years building a spiritual and personal development practice that had produced genuinely remarkable changes. Then came a 6-month period, when everything seemed to collapse simultaneously. A significant financial loss, the end of an important relationship, and a minor but alarming health crisis. During that time, his practice felt empty, his beliefs wavered, and the voice of cynicism whispered to him that everything he had believed in was nothing more than well-designed self-deception. What Ignacio eventually understood, not during the dark period, but after he had lived through it, was that those 6 months had been the most intense learning period of his entire life. Each breakdown had revealed an illusion he had been unknowingly holding on to. The financial loss had exposed an unexamined belief that his security depended on external factors he thought he controlled. The relationship breakup had revealed a need for validation that had been disguised as love. The health crisis had shown how much he ignored the signals his body had been sending for months. None of those revelations would have occurred without the pressure of darkness. And each one, integrated with honesty, became a piece of the scaffolding of a significantly stronger and more authentic version of himself. Darkness is not the enemy of the path. It is an integral part of it. The question is not how to avoid it, but how to traverse it so that what emerges on the other side is more real, deeper, and more capable than what entered. Practice during dark periods is not the same as during periods of expansion. It requires less ambition and more compassion, less visualization of bright futures and more honest presence with what is, less effort to artificially raise the frequency and more willingness to fully feel what is, knowing that what is fully felt passes and what is avoided or suppressed takes root. Consciously traversing the darkness is one of the most powerful, creative acts that exist. Reflection. Is there a dark period in your past that, in retrospect, you recognize as one of the most formative in your life? What did it reveal that the light could not have shown? What would be different about how you navigate current difficult times if you saw them not as deviations from the path, but as essential parts of it? Chapter 27. Energy limits. Protecting your field. Without closing yourself off from the world. There is a common confusion between two concepts that seem similar but generate opposite energetic effects: boundaries and walls. Walls are built from fear and seek to keep everything out. Boundaries are established from clarity and seek to define from where you can relate genuinely and sustainably to what is outside. Walls isolate. Boundaries protect without isolating. This distinction is fundamental because the ability to maintain clear energy boundaries is, in many ways, the prerequisite for everything else we explore in this book. Without clear boundaries, the energy you cultivate with practice and mindfulness is constantly dispersed or drained through relationships, situations, and contexts that consume it without reciprocity. And without that available energy, the creative process becomes like trying to fill a leaky container. Energy boundaries are not only those established by saying no, they are also those established through the quality of attention you choose to give, the types of conversations you allow to occupy your field, the environments in which you choose to spend your time, the people with whom you choose to be in close contact, and the depth to which you allow yourself to be affected by what is outside your sphere of influence. Monica was known among her friends and family as extraordinarily empathetic, always available to listen, always capable of deeply feeling what others felt, always present in the difficult moments of those around her. And at the same time, she lived in a state of chronic exhaustion and with a persistent feeling that her own needs never found the space to be met. Her empathy, without any limits to sustain it, was not a gift. It was a continuous drain that left her empty. Monica's work wasn't about becoming less empathetic. It was about learning to sustain empathy from a place of sufficient inner strength to accompany others' suffering without absorbing it herself. The difference between feeling with someone and being crushed by what they feel. This distinction, which in psychology is called empathy versus fusion, is precisely the energetic boundary that Monica needed to develop. Energy limits also operate in relation to information and environmental stimuli. In an ecosystem of information overload, where the flow of news, opinions, comparisons, and demands for attention is literally endless, the ability to decide what enters your field and what doesn't is an energetic survival skill. This isn't about escapism, but about consciously discerning what information genuinely serves your purpose and what only contributes to the noise. Healthy boundaries aren't static. They're constantly being calibrated based on circumstances and the state of available internal resources. In periods of expansion and high energy, you can allow yourself more openness and more contact with what's difficult or demanding. In periods of recharging or vulnerability, boundaries need to be firmer to protect the resources that recovery requires. Setting a genuine boundary, one that stems from inner clarity rather than fear or resentment, is also an act of honesty toward those around you. It tells them, more truthfully than any words, what is truly possible in the relationship. And relationships built on clear boundaries tend to be deeper, more honest, and more lasting than those built on silent tolerance of what cannot be sustained. Reflection. Identify a relationship or context where you feel your energy is consistently drained without real reciprocity. What specific boundary, whether of time, attention, emotional availability, or type of interaction, would you need to establish to protect your energy field? without completely shutting yourself off. What has prevented you from establishing that boundary so far? Chapter 28: Synchronicity as Confirmation of Alignment. Carl Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe the meaningful coincidence of events that have no direct causal connection, but seem related through their meaning. The number that appears at the exact moment you needed it. The book that comes into your hands when its subject is precisely what you're going through. The person who appears with the information you were looking for without you asking for it. The email that arrives the day after you made the decision that renders it irrelevant. Rational thought tends to dismiss these experiences as mere coincidences, a product of confirmation bias that makes us notice more what we're already looking for. And there's some truth to that explanation. Indeed, when we actively seek something, our attention tunes into related signals and makes them more visible. But this in itself is a real energetic mechanism, not an illusion. The fact that it has a functional explanation doesn't make it any less significant. Synchronicity, viewed from the perspective of conscious creation, is the visible confirmation that the inner and outer fields are in resonance. When you operate from a state of alignment, clarity of intention, and genuine openness, the field around you begins to organize information, people, and circumstances that resonate with that frequency. Not because the universe is a magical, wish-granting machine, but because inner alignment changes what you perceive, what you attract, and what you allow into your experience. Daniela had been thinking for weeks about a project that required a technical skill she lacked and was finding difficult to acquire. One day, in a context completely unrelated to the project, someone she knew only superficially mentioned in passing that she had just completed training in that exact skill and was looking for projects where she could apply it. For Daniela, this was no insignificant coincidence. It was a sign that her inner focus, clearly geared toward the project, had created the conditions for this information to reach her perceptual field at the precise moment it was needed. What distinguishes paranoia, where everything is given a forced meaning, from a healthy openness to synchronicities, is the direction of the interpretation. Paranoia seeks to confirm threats. A healthy openness recognizes confirmations of direction without becoming burdened with elaborate interpretations or making important decisions based solely on external signs without the support of internal evaluation. Synchronicities don't replace discernment. They complement it. They are additional information that the system offers you when you are in a sufficiently open and still state to perceive it. And learning to notice them, without exaggerating them, is part of developing the sensitivity to the field that characterizes someone who operates in a genuinely conscious way. The practice of recognizing synchronicities also has a valuable side effect. It cultivates a state of openness and presence, one of the most fertile states for creation. When you walk through life, noticing the landscape, paying attention to what emerges with a sense that there is intelligence in the process, your relationship with the everyday is transformed. The ordinary takes on a different quality, and from that different quality, life has a flavor that no amount of external achievements can replicate. Reflection. Think of a remarkable synchronicity you've experienced in the past, a moment when the field seemed to organize itself in a way that defied the logic of pure coincidence. What was your internal state at that time? What does it suggest about the relationship between your internal frequency and the organization of the external field? Chapter 29: Detachment from the outcome without indifference to the process. There is a persistent misunderstanding about the concept of detachment that leads to its being mistaken for its opposite, apathy. It is interpreted as not caring about what happens, as indifference disguised as equanimity, as the passivity of someone who claims not to want anything in order to avoid the disappointment of not getting it. This version of detachment has no transformative power. It is simply a sophisticated form of protection against the risk of desiring. Genuine detachment is something entirely different. It's the ability to fully commit to the process, to invest real energy, to genuinely want the outcome, and at the same time, not to make your inner peace dependent on that specific outcome arriving exactly as you've imagined it, and at the exact moment you've determined. It's total commitment to the process coupled with letting go of the result. This seemingly paradoxical combination is actually the condition for maximum energetic effectiveness. When you're attached to the outcome, every signal from the field is processed through the filter of whether it brings you closer to or further from what you want. And this filter of anxiety contaminates perception, contracts the field, and literally prevents you from seeing possibilities that don't exactly match the way you imagine the outcome should be. Detachment opens up the field. When you genuinely let go of the specific form and the exact moment, while maintaining clarity about the inner state you wish to inhabit, the field is free to arrange paths your controlling mind would never have considered. And often, those alternative paths are superior to those you would have designed from the anxious logic of attachment. Hector had spent 2 years developing a business proposal that was entirely focused on a specific implementation method. His energy for the project was intense, but fraught with tension, because he had invested so much that the idea of it not turning out exactly as he had designed it was unacceptable to him. This rigidity, energetically, conveyed a signal of desperation that the people he was negotiating with perceived but were unable to articulate. The turning point came when Hector genuinely allowed himself to let go of the specific form, not the core objective, which was to create something that generated real value for his clients while giving him freedom and prosperity, but rather the particular way he had envisioned that objective should materialize. With this freedom, he began to perceive variations of his proposal that he had previously dismissed. One of them, which had initially seemed inferior, turned out to be more viable, more scalable, and more aligned with what he genuinely wanted in the long run. The practice of detachment is also a practice of trust. Trust that the intelligence organizing the field can see more possibilities than your limited mind can generate. Trust that if something you genuinely desire doesn't arrive in the way you expected, there is information in that deviation that is more valuable than the original outcome would have yielded. Trust that the process has its own wisdom when allowed to operate without being stifled by anxious control. This confidence is not passivity. While you practice it, you continue to act. You continue to cultivate your inner state. You continue to make decisions from a place of alignment. It's just that you do so without the tension of someone who has staked everything on a single possible outcome. Reflection. Identify something you genuinely desire, but toward which you hold an energy of intense attachment or anxiety about the outcome. Ask yourself, what is the inner state I hope to inhabit when that materializes? Are there ways to begin cultivating that state right now, regardless of the specific outcome? What would change in your energy if you let go of the exact form while maintaining the direction? Chapter 30. The Mastery of the Inner State. There is one skill that, when genuinely developed, has a greater impact on quality of life and creative effectiveness than any technical skill, business strategy, or network. It is the ability to consciously and intentionally modulate one's internal state, regardless of external circumstances. We will call it mastery of the internal state. Most people operate in the opposite direction. External circumstances determine their internal state. If things are going well, they feel good. If things are going badly, they feel bad. If the environment is stimulating, they are motivated. If the environment is adverse, they are discouraged. This reactive mode of operation is not a character flaw. It is the default mode with which almost all of us reach adulthood without anyone having taught us that an alternative exists. The alternative is not cold stoicism that pretends to be unaffected by anything. It is the capacity to be genuinely touched by circumstances, to fully feel what is there, and at the same time to have access to internal resources that allow one to choose the state from which one responds, instead of simply reacting from the state that the circumstance imposes. This skill, like all skills, develops through deliberate practice. And practice begins with the ability to observe one's own state with enough distance not to be completely identified with it. The state is something you have, not something you are. And what you have can be modulated. Louisa led a team in a high-pressure industry where crises were frequent and deadlines were relentless. Before developing mastery of her inner state, each crisis found her in a reactive state that amplified the problem. Anxiety that spread to the team, hasty decisions that frequently created new problems, and a cumulative exhaustion that progressively reduced the quality of her leadership. Louisa's work consisted of developing what she eventually called her recalibration protocol, a set of specific practices, some lasting 2 minutes and others 20, that she had learned to activate the moment she recognized that her internal state was becoming misaligned with the way she wanted to operate. Not to eliminate the emotion, but to process it without letting it take control of her responses. Over time, the speed at which he could recalibrate accelerated. What once required 20 minutes of intense practice began to happen in 2 or 3. What once required withdrawing from the situation could now be done in the course of a conversation, with conscious breathing and an internal reframing that no one else noticed, but that completely changed the quality of his presence. The effect on her team was observable and documented. The quality of decisions improved. Positive emotional contagion from leadership increased. And paradoxically, the problems that were resolved in real time under her recalibrated leadership became less and less frequent. As if the frequency of competent calm she radiated prevented some of the conflicts that her previous frequency of anxiety attracted. Mastering your inner state is not the ultimate goal. It is the platform from which everything else becomes possible. When you can choose the state from which you operate, you can choose the frequency you transmit. And when you can choose the frequency you transmit, you hold in your hands the most fundamental tool for conscious creation. Reflection. What is the internal state from which you most frequently react when circumstances are adverse? What state would you prefer to respond from? What specific and concrete practice would help you make that transition when you need it most? Chapter 31. When life redirects you. Not everything that doesn't happen is a loss. Not everything that collapses is a failure. Not every door that closes does so to trap you inside. There is an intelligence in the process that, with enough perspective, reveals itself as redirection rather than rejection, as course correction rather than punishment, as protection from something greater than what you could see from your limited perspective. This understanding doesn't come the moment the door closes. It comes later, when time and distance allow you to see the bigger picture. And when you've experienced enough times how something perceived as loss opened up space for something better, more aligned, or more authentic. Trust in the process becomes more than just an optimistic stance. It becomes an understanding based on actual experience. Spiritual and energetic work doesn't guarantee that everything you desire will arrive exactly as you imagine it. It guarantees something different and more valuable. That when you operate from alignment, what arrives, even what seems not to arrive, tends to serve your highest good in ways that your current perspective can't always see. Rodrigo had dedicated 4 years to building a company in a specific industry. The effort had been monumental, and the results, while not disastrous, fell far short of his projections. After a long period of resistance, he made the decision to close it. At that moment, he experienced what could only be described as grief. Years of work, of an identity built around that project, of specific hopes, all dissolved. What happened in the following 18 months was something Rodrigo couldn't have intentionally planned. The network he had built in that industry turned out to be exactly what he needed for a different project that emerged almost spontaneously from conversations sparked by the failure of the first one. The skills he had developed in the process of building and closing the first company turned out to be precisely what the new project required. And the lessons he learned about what he didn't want, which only that specific failure could have taught him, proved to be an invaluable guide for making wiser decisions on this new path. Rodrigo eventually came to see that the closure of his first company hadn't been a failure, but rather the way the field had managed a redirection that led him to something more genuinely aligned with who he was. But that perspective was only possible from a distance, and only after he had gone through the grieving process without avoiding it. Trust in redirection doesn't mean not feeling the pain of what ends. It means not dwelling permanently on that pain, but remaining open enough that the closing of one thing simultaneously opens space for something else. Reflection. Think about something you experienced as a significant failure, loss, or rejection. With the perspective of time, can you see how that experience also redirected you towards something more aligned with your goals? What would change in how you approach current difficulties if you genuinely believed they contained within them the seed of redirection? Chapter 32. The power of now in creation. There is only one moment when creation occurs. Not in the past, because the past is already a fixed form, and the only thing you can do with it is change your energetic relationship with it. Not in the future, because the future is pure potential that has not yet collapsed into form. Creation occurs in the present, in this moment, in the only instant when energy is malleable, when frequency can be modulated, when a choice can be made. This statement, which on the surface seems obvious, has implications that most people haven't reached their logical conclusion. If creation only occurs in the present, then every moment your attention is entirely in the past or entirely in the future is a moment when you are not consciously creating. You are reenacting the past or anticipating the future, both activities that consume energy without producing the only kind of action that truly changes the field. Present action from the present state. Genuine presence in the present moment is not an optional wellness practice. It is the technical condition for conscious creation. And it is also, paradoxically, the most difficult thing for the human mind, which has been trained through millennia of evolution to be ever vigilant against a past that may repeat itself or a future that may threaten. Pablo was someone who lived in his plans. He planned the future with a meticulousness that from the outside might seem admirable, but which was actually a way of being permanently absent from the present. While he planned the future, his present life passed him by unlived. And the future that eventually arrived was different from the one he had planned, which led him to plan the next one with even greater intensity, perpetuating the cycle of being absent from the present. What Pablo discovered, in a gradual process that began with mindfulness practices, was that the present moment he had always been avoiding was far richer than his future-oriented mind had allowed him to perceive. Conversations with people he cared about had a depth he had never experienced, because he had always been partially elsewhere. Decisions made from full presence had a different quality than those made from anxious anticipation. Moments of genuine enjoyment, which had previously passed almost unnoticed, began to accumulate into a sustained sense of a life well lived. And paradoxically, the future that emerged from that radical presence in the now was more aligned with what he truly wanted than any of the futures he had constructed in his elaborate plans. Because action taken from full presence carries a quality of information about what truly matters that action taken from anxious projection cannot replicate. The present is the only place where your frequency truly exists. The past and the future are mental constructs. The energy you transmit, the signal you send out into the field, the reality you create. It all happens here, now, in the very fabric of this moment. And when you give this moment the full attention it deserves, you discover that it contains within itself everything you need to begin building exactly what you desire. Reflection. How much of the time you are physically present in the important situations of your life, are you also genuinely present in your attention and energy? What specific mental habit, whether ruminating on the past or worrying about the future, most frequently pulls you away from the one moment where creation is possible? Chapter 33. The community as an amplifying field. There is a principle in acoustics that states that when two waves of the same pitch meet, they not only sound simultaneously, they amplify each other. The combined energy is greater than the sum of its individual parts. This phenomenon, called constructive interference in physics, has a direct equivalent in the human realm. When two or more people come together from states of genuine alignment toward a shared purpose, the field they generate together is qualitatively different and more powerful than the one each generates separately. This isn't a statement that requires mystical faith. It's the explanation of why certain groups of people produce results that none of their members could have produced individually, even if they technically had similar abilities. The difference isn't in the skills. It's in the field they generate together when there's coherence of purpose and frequency. Similarly, the company of people whose dominant frequency is fear, resentment, scarcity, or victimhood is not neutral for your energy field. Not because they are bad people, most are not, but because the interference of disparate frequencies creates a resulting field that is lower than what any of the participants would generate alone. Energetically toxic environments drain the resources that conscious creation requires, just as surely as a hole in the bottom of a boat drains the water you need to navigate. Veronica was an entrepreneur who had spent years in a social circle that, while providing her with a sense of belonging and genuine affection, operated from a collective frequency of complaint, skepticism toward any ambition, and mutual validation of limitations. Whenever she expressed a new aspiration, the group returned it softened, rationalized, reduced to something more manageable within the framework of what that group collectively considered possible. The day Veronica began investing in connections with people who operated from frequencies of expansion, possibility, and genuine growth, the contrast was immediate and disconcerting. Not because the people in her original circle were worse, but because the different field was. Conversations in the new space generated ideas that simply hadn't emerged in the old one. Possibilities that seemed pretentious in the original seemed obvious in the new one. And gradually, her own frequency aligned more consistently with that of the field that most expanded her. This doesn't mean abandoning relationships that have deep roots or building your social life exclusively around energy performance. It means being aware of the fields you move in and their effect on your frequency, and making deliberate choices about where you invest your time and energetic presence so that they support rather than hinder what you are building. The community, as an amplifying field, also operates in the sense of shared responsibility. When you make a public commitment to others from a place of authenticity, the field of relationships creates a constructive pressure that helps sustain the practice in moments when individual motivation falters. Not the pressure of judgment, but the pressure of genuine commitment to witnesses who matter. Reflection. Examine the environments and communities where you spend the most time. What is the dominant frequency of each? Do they expand or contract you? Is there a field you need to build or find, of people who operate from the frequency of what you are seeking to cultivate within yourself? Chapter 34. Constant practice. Over occasional intensity. There's a certain allure to moments of high spiritual or energetic intensity. Transformative retreats, peak experiences, mind-bending books, conversations that shift your perspective in hours. These moments are genuinely valuable, but there's a trap in mistaking them for actual practice. The trap is believing that transformation happens at these peaks of intensity, and that all that remains is to find the next one. The real transformation, the one that changes the structure of the energy field in a lasting way, doesn't happen at peak moments. It happens through the accumulation of ordinary, consistent, often boring, always available practice. It happens in the 5 minutes of stillness each morning, in the choice to breathe before reacting, made again and again, in the habit of redirecting attention toward what builds up instead of what drains, practiced in the most ordinary moments of the day, in the consistency of cultivating the chosen inner state, even when there is nothing in the external environment that warrants it. This is the difference between the weekend spiritual seeker who returns from a retreat with a genuine experience, but 6 weeks later is exactly back where they started, and the person who has established modest but daily practices that sustainably recalibrate their spiritual life. The former has peak experiences. The latter has a transformed life. Adrian was one of those people who sought the perfect practice. He had tried dozens of systems, tools, and approaches, always looking for the one that would produce the fastest and most profound change. And he always abandoned each practice the moment it became ordinary, convinced that the lack of sustained intensity was a sign that it had stopped working. What Adrian eventually understood was that the ordinariness of a sustained practice is not a sign that it has stopped working. It is a sign that it is becoming integrated, that it is moving from the level of conscious effort to the level of habitual structure. Practices that feel extraordinary all the time are still at the level of novelty. Those that feel ordinary but are continued anyway are the ones that are changing the underlying architecture. Adrian chose 3 simple practices and committed to them for 90 days without seeking to replace them with more promising ones. 5 minutes of silence upon waking. An honest question at the end of the day about the state from which he had been operating. And the habit of deliberately identifying one real thing to feel genuine gratitude for before going to sleep. Nothing more. No grand vision of the entire system. Just those 3 things, every day, without exception. After 90 days, the changes Adrian reported weren't the dramatic ones he experienced during his weekend retreats. They were something different and more substantial. A different quality in how he faced the same old challenges. a greater speed in recalibrating when something threw him off balance, a consistency in his baseline state that no previous intense experience had managed to instill. Consistency over intensity is not the least exciting path to transformation. It is the only path that leads to the destination. Reflection. Identify the inner cultivation practices you have started and abandoned. What was the pattern of abandonment? Did you stop when they ceased to feel intense or new? What would be different if you committed to just one modest but absolutely consistent practice for the next 90 days? Chapter 35. The endless expansion of being. There's a belief that many people carry without ever examining it, that growth has a point of arrival, a state of development that is reached and from which there is nothing more to do, nothing more to be, or nothing more to understand. This belief, although rarely stated explicitly, operates at its core as an invisible limit on the willingness to continue expanding. The reality of human consciousness is that it has no limits. There is no level of understanding beyond which no further depth is possible. There is no stage of development that exhausts a human being's potential. Every genuine expansion reveals not the final destination, but the next level of complexity, beauty, and possibility that was previously invisible from the level before. This means that anyone who has undergone a genuine transformation knows that the result of that transformation is not simply arriving at a destination, but rather becoming someone capable of initiating the next level of the journey. And that this next level contains its own depth, its own challenges, and its own revelations that can only be perceived from within it. This understanding fundamentally changes our relationship with the growth process. When growth has a destination, every moment of difficulty or apparent setback is a threat to progress toward that destination. But when growth is endless, every moment, including those of difficulty, is simply the content of the current level. Information about what this level has to teach before the next one is revealed. Elena had been on a path of personal and spiritual development for 15 years and had reached a point she described as a plateau. She felt she had resolved the most obvious layers of her limiting patterns, that her life was generally functioning well, and that she no longer knew exactly what came next. This plateau generated a subtle anxiety. Was this all there was to it? What Elena couldn't see from that plateau was that the plateau itself was the next level of challenge. The challenge of expanding without a crisis forcing the move. The challenge of growing by choice, not necessity. The challenge of sustaining the expansion to the next level when the current one was comfortable and functional. These are, paradoxically, the most difficult challenges for many people. Expanding when there is no urgent reason forcing it. Crisis-free expansion requires something different than expansion forced by difficulty. It requires sustained curiosity, an active willingness to be disturbed by new perspectives, and the humility to know that from whatever level of understanding you have reached, there are dimensions you cannot yet see. Human beings are not designed to arrive. They are designed to expand. And when they resist that expansion, when they settle on a plateau, as if it were the final destination, the process of contraction begins, which eventually manifests as the same kinds of difficulties that the previous growth had resolved, only in new and more sophisticated forms. Endless expansion is not a condemnation to perpetual effort. It is an invitation to perpetual curiosity, and genuine curiosity, the kind that doesn't seek to confirm what is already known, but genuinely to discover what is unknown, is one of the highest and most fertile frequencies a human being can inhabit. Reflection. In what area of your life have you reached a plateau that feels like an end rather than the beginning of the next level? What new question? What new perspective? Or what new challenge could you choose to bridge that plateau to the next dimension of expansion? Chapter 36. Live from the frequency you choose. Everything we have explored in this book converges on a point that is both the simplest to state and the most profound to embody: the possibility of consciously and consistently choosing the frequency from which you operate in your life. Not as a state you reach once and maintain effortlessly, but as a daily, sometimes challenging, but always available practice of choosing the state from which you perceive, decide, act, and relate. This choice doesn't happen just once. It happens constantly. The moment you receive difficult news, you have the choice to inhabit the contraction of fear or the expansion of seeking the wisest response. In a conversation that becomes complicated, you have the choice to react defensively or to respond with clarity. In a project that isn't progressing as quickly as you expected, you have the choice to interpret the delay as failure or as valuable information. In a moment of success, you have the choice to embrace it fully or to minimize it out of discomfort with your sense of deservingness. Each of these choices, made in the space of a second, is an energetic declaration. It's the signal you send out into the field about the frequency from which you operate. And the field responds to the accumulation of these signals with the relentless coherence we've explored throughout this book. What distinguishes someone who genuinely lives from this understanding is not that they never experience low states, fear, doubt, frustration, or loss. These states are an inseparable part of the complete human experience. What distinguishes them is the speed of recalibration, the ability to recognize when they have drifted from their chosen frequency and to return to it, not with self-flagellating drama for having drifted, but with the serene practicality of someone who simply adjusts their course when they notice they have strayed. This life doesn't resemble the idealized image of spirituality that many materials project. There is no perpetual peace, no constant joy, and no absence of conflict. There is something different and much more real: the experience of being the active author of your inner state instead of the passive recipient of what the external world gives you. And from that authorship, life has a taste of genuine power that no external circumstance, however favorable, can replicate if the inner state doesn't accompany it. Francisco had reached the end of a long process of inner work, with an understanding he described as the most unexpected gift of the journey. It wasn't the absence of problems, nor the achievement of the goals he had envisioned. It was the certainty that he had access at any moment to a state from which he could face anything life presented with resources he hadn't known he possessed. Not because the problems had diminished, but because he had expanded beyond them. That is what this understanding offers. Not the elimination of the difficulty, the expansion of the one who faces it. And from that expansion, the difficulty doesn't disappear, but it loses the power to determine who you are and from where you operate. The frequency you choose is not your automatic reaction to the world. It is your deliberate response to it. And that difference between reaction and response, between automatism and choice, between being the character and being the author, is the difference this book has tried, from its very first page, to put in your hands. Reflection. If you could genuinely choose the dominant frequency from which you operate starting tomorrow, which would you choose? Not the perfect one, nor the one you imagine you should choose. The one that truly resonates with what you most want to experience and create. What would you need to cultivate, release, or transform for that frequency to become your baseline state? Chapter 37. The beginning. That seems like an ending. The last page of a book like this isn't an ending. It's the threshold from which the only thing that truly matters begins, applying what you've learned to the very fabric of your life. Because understanding that isn't embodied is just accumulated information. And information, however brilliant, doesn't change anything on its own. It only changes things when it becomes practice, a choice, a habitual state, the way you wake up tomorrow and navigate the day ahead. Throughout these pages, you have explored the architecture of your reality from its deepest foundations. You have seen how habitual thoughts carve grooves that become predetermined destinations. You have understood why emotion is not an accident of biology, but the fuel that authenticates and empowers any creative process. You have examined beliefs as the source code that determines the mold within which all your experience takes shape. You have recognized identity as the vessel that limits or expands what you can contain. You have explored attention as the most valuable currency you possess. You have understood silence as a technology, the body as an instrument, gratitude as a tuner, and detachment as an opening to the entire field of possibilities. And perhaps most importantly, you have found in all of this not an external system of rules to follow, but the recognition of something that on some level you already knew. That you are not the passive recipient of a life that happens to you. That there is within you a capacity to influence the field of your experience that goes far beyond what the dominant cultural narrative has told you about who you are and what you can do. What follows doesn't require you to be perfect. It doesn't require you to have internalized everything on these pages. It simply requires you to start where you are, with what you have, choosing just one practice from those you've found here and applying it with the consistency that produces real transformation. Just one, with consistency, without needing to have everything figured out before taking the first step, because the first step doesn't have to be the right one. It has to be real. Matteo reached the end of a book, similar to the one you're holding several years ago, with the feeling many have at that moment. A combination of genuine inspiration and an honest question about what exactly to do with everything he had understood. He didn't start 10 practices simultaneously. He didn't reorganize his life overnight. He chose one question he would ask himself every morning for 3 months before getting out of bed. From what state do I want to operate today? And every night he added a second one. From what state did I actually operate? The distance between those two questions, honestly observed over 90 days, taught him more about himself than decades of experience without that observation had ever produced. And from that more precise knowledge, choices about how to cultivate the morning state, what practices helped him, what habits drained him, emerged with a clarity that no external system could have given him. This book ends here. Your work begins with the next situation you face, the next conversation you have, the next time something external tries to dictate your internal state, and you, now more aware of what you're doing, choose to respond instead of react, not because you're different from who you were before the first page, but because now you know something you didn't know with such clarity before. That you have a choice, that the choice exists, that the choice is real, and that the life you desire isn't waiting for you in the distant future when circumstances are right. It's available now at the frequency you can choose to embody in this moment. That's the only beginning that matters. And it's always now. Chapter 38. The ego as an ally, not as an enemy. Few words in the vocabulary of personal development and spirituality have received as much bad press as the word ego. In most contexts, where it appears, it carries an implicit condemnation. The ego is the obstacle, the illusory one, the one that must be transcended, dissolved, or silenced so that the true self can emerge. This narrative, although containing a partial truth, has generated in many people an internal war that consumes more energy than it releases. And that, paradoxically, strengthens precisely what it seeks to weaken. The functional reality of the ego is more nuanced and more useful when understood honestly. The ego, in its original and healthy function, is the individuation mechanism that allows you to operate as a differentiated being in the world. It is the structure that organizes your sense of identity, enabling you to plan, remember, project, and relate to your environment coherently. Without some form of functional ego structure, there would be no one to make decisions, keep commitments, or build anything over time. The problem isn't the ego itself. It's the hypertrophied ego, the one that has taken complete control of the system and operates from a constant fear of not being enough, of not having enough, of being seen as inadequate. This ego isn't the enemy to be destroyed, but rather the frightened child who needs to be understood, not blindly obeyed, but also not attacked with the violence of someone trying to eliminate it. When someone tries to suppress or destroy the ego without first understanding it, what often happens is that the ego becomes more defensive and more subtle in its operations. The same needs for validation, control, and protection that once operated relatively visibly are now disguised with the language of spirituality. Humility becomes a sophisticated way of seeking attention. Detachment becomes emotional coldness that protects against vulnerability. Spiritual practice becomes yet another arena for competition and a sense of superiority. This is what some call the spiritual ego, and it is one of the hardest forms to detect precisely because it uses the language of growth to do the exact opposite. Nicholas had been on an intense path of spiritual development for years. He meditated with discipline, studied diligently, and practiced consistently. And yet, there was a growing tension within him that he couldn't quite pinpoint. He discovered it when a close friend, with the honesty that only deep friendship allows, pointed out something Nicholas had refused to see. That behind all his practice lay an unexamined need to be seen as someone who had gone further than others. That his spirituality, while genuine in many ways, also served as a territory of subtle superiority. The revelation was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating. Because once Nicola could see the role his ego was playing in his spiritual practice, he was able to relate to it differently. Not by trying to eliminate it, but by understanding what legitimate need it was serving in a distorted way. Deep down, Nicholas's spiritual ego was serving a need for belonging and worth that had roots in childhood experiences of exclusion. That need wasn't the problem. The way the ego was trying to satisfy it was. When Nicholas began to address that need more directly, through genuinely intimate relationships and honest work on his history of exclusion, the ego's need to use spirituality as a terrain of superiority naturally diminished. The practice became calmer, less performative, more genuine, and paradoxically, more effective. Integrating the ego, rather than suppressing it, involves recognizing its functions, both the healthy ones and those that generate suffering, and working with them with the same compassion you would apply to any part of your experience that needs understanding. The ego doesn't disappear with spiritual maturity. It becomes more transparent, less dominant, more at the service of a greater intelligence. But it remains present, and that presence, when properly understood and related, is part of what allows you to operate effectively and coherently in the physical world. The war with the ego depletes resources that could be available for creation. Integrating the ego liberates them. Reflection. Are there any areas of your life where the ego operates in ways you recognize as limiting, whether through the need for approval, fear of judgment, constant comparison, or difficulty being vulnerable? Without attacking it, ask yourself, what legitimate need is it trying to satisfy in this way? Is there a more direct and effective way to satisfy that same need? Chapter 39. Intuition as a channel of higher information. There is a kind of knowledge that doesn't come through analysis. It isn't produced by accumulating data, comparing options, or following cause and effect logic. It arrives suddenly, complete in itself, with a quality of certainty that conscious reasoning can rarely match. You call it intuition, a hunch, instinct, or simply that knowing you can't quite explain. But when you listen to it, it almost never fails you. And when you ignore it, you almost always regret it. Intuition is not mysticism. It is the result of your system processing vastly more information than your rational consciousness can handle. And that this information, processed in parallel, subconsciously, occasionally emerges as a signal at the conscious level when it is relevant enough. From the perspective of energetic creation, it is also the way the field communicates information to you that your analytical mind cannot directly generate. Whatever the exact mechanism by which it operates, the practical result is the same. Intuition is an extraordinarily valuable source of information that most people either systematically ignore or do not know how to distinguish from mental noise. The first difficulty is learning to distinguish genuine intuition from its imitators. Fear, for example, is a frequent imitator. When fear says, "Don't do this," it can feel like an intuitive signal of protection. But there is a qualitative difference between the signal of fear and the signal of intuition that, with practice, becomes recognizable. Fear generates a contraction that comes accompanied by threatening narratives, images of negative consequences, and an energy of urgency and closure. Genuine intuition has a different quality. It is calmer, more centered, more of a direction than an alarm. Desire can also mimic intuition when we want something so badly that the system generates a signal that it's right, because we want to believe it is. Here, the distinction is more subtle, but it exists nonetheless. Desire masquerading as intuition tends to generate excitement mixed with the anxiety that it might not happen. Genuine intuition has a more serene quality, more one of recognition than desire. Valentina was a project manager who had built her career on rigorous analysis and data-driven decision-making. She considered intuition to have no place in her professional world, until she began to notice a pattern she couldn't ignore. Decisions where she had disregarded a clear internal signal because it contradicted the data had yielded significantly worse results than decisions where, even without complete data, she had trusted that signal. This didn't lead her to abandon analysis. It led her to integrate intuition as an additional source of information, not superior to analysis, but complementary to it. She began to cultivate access to that source by creating moments of silence before important decisions, not to analyze more, but to listen to what emerged when the analysis paused, and to verify the signal that arose by asking whether it had the quality of stillness and certainty or that of urgency and desire. Over time, her ability to discern genuine intuitive signals became more refined, and integrating that source into her decision-making processes produced results that she herself described as superior to what analysis alone could produce. Accessing intuition requires the same conditions as accessing any subtle signal: sufficient stillness to perceive it, genuine openness to what it communicates even if it contradicts expected logic, and the will to act on it even if you cannot fully explain why. Intuition is the field speaking directly to you. Learning to listen to it is learning to receive the most relevant information that the creative process can offer. Reflection. Think about a past decision where you ignored a clear intuitive signal and later recognized that the signal was correct. What was the quality of that signal, and how did it differ from the other mental noise present at the time? What conditions would you create to give more space to that voice in your current decisions? Chapter 40. Radical Gratitude. Being thankful for what still hurts. There is a level of gratitude practice that goes far beyond simply being thankful for good things. And when genuinely accessed, it produces a transformation in the energy field that no other practice can match with the same speed. It is what could be called radical gratitude, the ability to find, even in the most difficult experiences, even those that still hurt, something to recognize as having been worthwhile, even if you didn't want it and even if you didn't choose it. This practice isn't for every moment or every situation. There are fresh pains that need to be felt and held before they can be integrated. There are wounds that require time before the perspective that allows for radical gratitude becomes accessible without it becoming a way to bypass the necessary process. Forcing gratitude onto pain that is still being processed isn't transformation. It's repression disguised as spiritual language. But when time and honesty have allowed the experience to settle, when the wound has been genuinely felt and not just tolerated, then accessing radical gratitude towards it is one of the most liberating acts there is. Radical gratitude doesn't say that what happened was right. It says something different. That even in what wasn't right, in what you didn't choose, in what cost you more than you think you could have afforded, there was something that shaped you, that revealed something about yourself, that developed abilities within you that would otherwise have remained dormant, or that protected you from something that, from your perspective at the time, you couldn't see. Josefina had lost her mother at an age when that loss left scars that took years of conscious work to begin to integrate. For a long time, the mere suggestion that there might be something to be grateful for in that experience triggered a mixture of anger and sadness that made conversation impossible. And she was right to react that way. The pain was real and deserved the space to be fully felt. But years later, when grief had found its way into her life without disappearing, Josefina began to see something that had previously been invisible, that the early loss of her mother had cultivated in her a profound connection to what truly matters, a connection few of her generation possessed. A capacity for being present in the face of others' suffering made her an extraordinary companion in difficult times. A clarity of priorities had protected her from investing decades in things that, deep down, didn't matter to her. None of those qualities justified the loss, but they were all real, and all had emerged from it. And when Josefina could hold both truths simultaneously, that the loss had been devastating and that something of genuine value had emerged from it, something in her energy field reorganized in a way she herself couldn't quite put into words, but which felt like a wholeness that unintegrated grief could never produce. Radical gratitude is the act of reclaiming your entire experience as part of who you are. Not just the easy, bright, and celebratory parts. Also the difficult, dark, and costly ones. Because the totality of what you have lived through is the raw material of who you are now. And who you are now is the platform from which you create what is to come. Denying any part of that raw material in the name of maintaining a comfortable narrative is to work with incomplete material. Integrating it all, with the honesty and compassion it requires, is to build from the solidity of the complete experience. Reflection. Identify a difficult experience from your past that has had enough time to begin to be integrated. Without forcing anything or minimizing the pain it caused, ask yourself with genuine openness, what emerged from that experience that could not have emerged otherwise? What capacity, clarity, or depth exists within you today that has direct roots in what was most difficult for you? Chapter 41. Abundance as a state, not as a destiny. Most people pursue abundance as if it were a destination reached once they've accumulated enough external resources, enough money, enough recognition, enough connections, enough security. And in that pursuit, they make the fundamental mistake that keeps abundance always one step away. They treat it as a condition the external world will bestow upon them once they've met certain requirements, instead of recognizing it as an internal state cultivated independently of circumstances, and one that, when genuinely cultivated, transforms those circumstances. The distinction may seem semantic, but it has radical practical consequences. When abundance is the ultimate goal, there are always reasons why it hasn't been reached yet. The economy, circumstances, people who haven't acted as they should, resources that are still lacking. The state of scarcity is always justifiable because there will always be something incomplete. And from this state of justified scarcity, the frequency transmitted to the countryside is precisely the one that reproduces more scarcity. When abundance is an internal state, the access point changes completely. It no longer depends on the external world delivering something first. It depends on your ability to recognize and inhabit what already exists, to expand your awareness of what you have before what you're still seeking arrives, to operate from the frequency of someone who already has access to more than enough, even if the numbers don't yet fully confirm it. This is not a denial of reality or legitimate needs. It is the recognition that the frequency of abundance and the frequency of scarcity produce radically different internal states, perceptions, and fields of attraction, and that choosing the former deliberately and genuinely creates the conditions from which external abundance has space to materialize. Alejandro had grown up in a family with limited financial resources where the dominant discourse about money was one of constant scarcity. There was never enough. It was never secure. It could always run out. This mindset was ingrained with the solidity that only repetition during formative years can produce. And decades later, although his objective economic situation was significantly better than that of his family of origin, the internal state from which Alejandro related to money remained that of the child who had learned that there is never enough. This state manifested itself in ways he himself recognized as irrational. Anxiety about any expense, even though he had the resources to do so, difficulty enjoying what he had because he was always thinking about how it could be lost, resistance to investing in his own growth because spending felt like a threat rather than a seed. Alejandro's work wasn't about financial education, it was about transforming his internal state of mind regarding abundance. He began by deliberately identifying every day evidence of abundance that already existed in his life, but that his scarcity filter had rendered invisible. Not future abundance or aspirational abundance, present and real abundance, albeit modest. The food on the table, his functioning health, the relationships that sustained him, the skills he possessed, the opportunities his current position already afforded him. Over time, and with consistent practice, Alejandro's perceptual filter began to shift. The same external circumstances began to be seen from a different perspective. And from that different perspective, the decisions he made about how to generate, manage, and invest his resources became wiser, more expansive, and more aligned with genuine growth. External abundance followed internal abundance, not instantly, but with a consistency he himself recognized as the direct result of this change in mindset. Abundance isn't about what you have. It's about how you relate to what you have and what may come your way. And that relationship is always an internal choice that precedes any external circumstance. Reflection. If you were to take an honest inventory today of what you already have, including skills, relationships, opportunities, health, knowledge, and resources of any kind, how much real abundance exists in your life that your scarcity mindset has been making invisible? How would your state change if you genuinely acknowledged that present abundance before chasing future abundance? Chapter 42. The Energy Legacy. You leave in every interaction. Every time you interact with another person, you leave something in the field of that relationship that lingers beyond the time the exchange lasted. Not always in the form of conscious memories, sometimes only as a lingering feeling that the other person carries with them, unable to articulate exactly where it came from. The feeling of having been genuinely seen and heard, or of having been tolerated rather than received. The feeling of having been inspired, or of having been diminished in a way that no one would name, but that everyone felt. The feeling that the field expanded in that encounter, or that it contracted. This energetic legacy you leave in every interaction doesn't require grand gestures or elaborate words. It's transmitted primarily through the quality of presence you bring to the encounter. And the quality of presence can't be faked skillfully enough for the other person's nervous system not to register it. People may not be able to articulate whether you're truly present or merely physically available, but they feel it, always. This principle has implications that extend beyond interpersonal ethics, though they are relevant there as well. It has direct implications for the effectiveness of anything you try to build through relationships, which is practically everything worth building in life. Businesses, families, friendships, communities, causes, everything is built through the field of relationships. And that field is directly proportional to the quality of presence that the participants bring. Roberto was known in his industry as brilliant and competent. His presentations were impeccable, his arguments sound, his knowledge profound. And yet, those who knew him well noticed something they struggled to articulate. That when you spoke with Roberto, you rarely felt fully engaged. There was a subtle distance, a part of him that always remained slightly detached, as if a fraction of his attention was always elsewhere, evaluating, calculating, anticipating. What Roberto didn't realize was that this partial presence was costing him more than his technical skills were earning him. The relationships he built tended to be functional but superficial. The loyalty he generated was more about convenience than genuine commitment. And the most important projects, those requiring the level of trust that only genuine presence can build, frequently slipped through his fingers in favor of people who were technically less brilliant but energetically more present. For Roberto, the change began with a simple practice that was initially difficult because it was so counterintuitive. Before every important interaction, he would take a minute to deliberately let go of any agenda leading up to that conversation and ask himself a genuine question. What does this person need from this encounter? Not what I need to gain, but what the other person is seeking. This simple reframing of his focus changed the quality of his presence in ways that others immediately perceived, even if they couldn't describe it. The energetic legacy of genuine presence accumulates over time in the form of reputation. Not the reputation of accomplishments, but the reputation of how it feels to be in your space. And that reputation, built interaction by interaction, is the most valuable and least replicable asset you can build in a lifetime. People remember how you made them feel when they were with you far more clearly and for longer than what you said or what you accomplished. Your presence is your most direct and immediate legacy, and genuine presence, the kind that comes from truly being here, in this moment, with this person, without any agenda interfering, is the most powerful form of influence there is. Reflection. Think of someone whose presence has left a positive and lasting impression on you. Someone who, when they were with you, made you feel genuinely welcomed and seen. What was the specific quality of their presence that produced that effect? What percentage of your daily interactions do you bring that same quality? What prevents you from bringing it more consistently? Chapter 43. Returning to yourself as the supreme practice. At the end of every worthwhile journey lies a discovery that can only be made at the end, though deep down it was already there at the beginning, that what you were looking for outside was always within. Not as cheap consolation for those who didn't find what they sought in the external world, but as the most genuine and most difficult understanding to embody, that the source of everything you seek, peace, clarity, power, love, fulfillment, is not in any circumstance you don't yet have. It lies in the quality of the relationship you have with yourself. This statement is not an argument for isolation or rejection of the outside world. Relationships matter, achievements matter, circumstances matter, but everything the outside world can offer you, any good that may come from the outside, will have the quality and durability that comes from the relationship you have with yourself from within. Love that comes from the outside will land in a vessel that can either hold it or drain it, depending on how much you love yourself. Success that comes from the outside will be experienced as fulfillment or emptiness, depending on how well you know and honor yourself. The practice of returning to oneself is not narcissism or self-absorption. It is the discipline of maintaining contact with what you genuinely feel, think, and value, independently of what the environment expects, demands, or rewards. It is the ability to consult yourself before consulting the world, to know what you want before asking what others want from you, to identify your own boundaries before others cross them without you noticing. Miriam had spent decades being everyone's need. Mother, daughter, wife, colleague, friend. A constant source of support in multiple life systems simultaneously. She was extraordinarily good at understanding and responding to others' needs, and profoundly disconnected from her own needs, feelings, and desires. Not because she'd been forbidden to, but because the habit of being completely outward-oriented was so ingrained and automatic that her inner compass hadn't been consulted in years. Miriam's return process was, in her own words, simultaneously the simplest and the most terrifying she had ever undertaken. Simple because the questions that initiated it weren't complicated. What am I feeling right now? What do I want in this situation? What do I need now? Grounding, because decades of not asking herself these questions make them feel strange, almost forbidden, as if the act of consulting oneself were selfish or illegitimate. With time and practice, Miriam discovered something she hadn't expected. The more genuinely she connected with herself, the better she related to others. Not because she gave less, but because what she gave came from a more real, more grounded, more sustainable place. The relationships she cultivated from inner wholeness had a completely different quality than those she had maintained from the emptiness that constant service without self-connection produces. Returning to yourself isn't a single event. It's a practice that happens multiple times a day, in the small moments when you can choose to consult the external world first or your inner self. It's in the question you ask yourself before making a decision. Does this resonate with who I truly am and what I want? Or am I doing it to meet an external expectation? In the moment, before responding to someone. From what real place am I speaking? At the end of the day, was I present with myself today, or did I live the day completely outwardly focused? The relationship you have with yourself is the longest, most constant, and most defining relationship of your life. No other relationship can replace it. No external achievement can compensate for it. And no lasting transformation occurs without it as its foundation. Returning to yourself is neither the beginning nor the end of the journey. It is the journey itself, traveled again and again, with greater depth and tenderness as you go. And each return, however small, is an act of the most fundamental fidelity there is. Fidelity to who you truly are. Reflection. When was the last time you genuinely consulted yourself? Not what others expect of you, not what logic would dictate, but what you, deep down, feel, want, and need. What would you find if you did so right now, in this moment, with the same attention and honesty you use to attend to the needs of others? Chapter 44. The Patience of the One Who Trusts. There is one quality that distinguishes those who sustain their transformative practice over time and eventually see its fruits from those who begin intensely and withdraw before the process has had time to mature. It is not discipline, although discipline matters. It is not intelligence, talent, or knowledge of the correct techniques. It is something harder to learn and easier to lose. The patience of the one who trusts. Not the patience of one who waits resignedly because they have no other option. Not the patience of one who has learned to suppress impatience for fear of the consequences of expressing it. Active, cultivated patience, that of one who deeply understands why the timing of the process cannot be accelerated beyond a certain point, and who has found genuine peace in that understanding. Impatience in transformative work is one of the most effective saboteurs there is, precisely because it masquerades as commitment. A person impatient with their own process appears dedicated. They want results. They work intensely. They become frustrated when the results don't arrive as quickly as the effort seems to warrant. But this frustration, while born from a desire for change, communicates to the subconscious precisely the frequency of scarcity and inadequacy that the work is trying to dissolve. Impatience says, "It's still not enough. I haven't arrived yet. The process isn't working." And these signals activate resistance mechanisms that slow down the very process that impatience wanted to accelerate. Trust is the antidote, but not the declared trust that holds while there is evidence and collapses when the evidence is no longer visible. Genuine trust doesn't depend on short-term evidence because it rests on understanding how the process works in the long run. To develop this understanding, one must honestly examine the timescale on which real subconscious transformation operates. The beliefs being worked on, in most cases, have decades of history behind them. The neural connections that support them are highways built through thousands of repetitions. The identity being transformed was constructed over years of experiences that accumulated layer upon layer. No process that produces real and lasting change at this level of depth can be measured in weeks. It may begin in weeks. It may show its first signs in months. It consolidates over time with a consistency that only patience can sustain. Nature offers the best school of patience for anyone willing to learn from it. The tree that provides shade today didn't ask in its first week why it wasn't yet providing shade. The river that has carved the canyon today didn't grow impatient in its 10th year because of the slowness of the process. The process itself held the answer. The steady flow against the resistance of the rock was all that was required, plus the time that the process needed to complete. Time is not the enemy of transformative work. It is its most reliable ally, because time, applied with consistent practice, produces exactly what no short-term intensity can: lasting change. Change that doesn't disappear when motivation wanes. Change that doesn't need to be renewed with each new cycle of inspiration, because it has already become the foundation from which to operate. There are subtle signs that the process is working that impatience often overlooks, because they don't correspond to the kind of dramatic evidence it expects. An emotional reaction that was automatic and intense in the past was less intense this time. A limiting thought appears, but is now recognized as a pattern rather than experienced as truth. A situation that previously produced anxiety now only elicits attention, a decision made from a broader and calmer place than it would have been 6 months ago. These signs aren't the spectacular results that impatience expects. They are the real changes that transformation produces. And those who learn to recognize and value them find in them the nourishment that confidence needs to endure over time. The patience of someone who trusts also requires a specific relationship with uncertainty, because the process of transformation doesn't have a precise map with guaranteed dates and results. It operates in territories where certainty lies in the process, not in the specific outcome or its exact moment of arrival. And inhabiting that uncertainty, without it turning into anxiety, requires a capacity to tolerate the unknown that most modern nervous systems haven't developed naturally, because their environment hasn't trained them for it. Nighttime work can develop this capacity in ways that daytime practice alone cannot. Because on the threshold of sleep, when you release the image you planted with the confidence of someone who doesn't need to know exactly when it will germinate, you are practicing precisely that, inhabiting uncertainty with peace rather than urgency, trusting the process even when the result is not yet visible, surrendering to the time the process requires with the serenity of the gardener who knows that the seed doesn't need to be watched to germinate. It only needs the right soil, enough water, and its due time. Over time, this nightly practice of letting go with confidence naturally extends to other areas of life. The ability to inhabit uncertainty peacefully, cultivated each night in subconscious practice, becomes available during the day in situations that previously produced anxiety about the unknown. Not because the situations change, but because the internal response to uncertainty has been recalibrated through consistent nightly practice. The patience of one who trusts is not a virtue one either has or lacks. It is a capacity that is cultivated, and the threshold of sleep, with its repeated practice of planting and releasing, of inhabiting the vision and trusting the process, is the most effective laboratory for developing it. Tonight, when you plant your seed and release it, practice remaining for a moment in the state of one who trusts, not in the state of one who waits anxiously, in the state of one who knows that what is sown with intention and perseverance grows, always grows, in its own time and in the ways that the entire system can produce. That state, sustained long enough for the subconscious to register it, is in itself one of the most powerful seeds you can plant. Genuine trust is fertilizer for everything that grows in the dark. Chapter 45. Gratitude as a quantum portal. Gratitude is perhaps the most frequently used tool in all contexts of personal development and well-being, and also one of the most often misunderstood. It is presented so regularly as a positivity technique, as a way to feel better when circumstances are difficult, as a spirit's lifting practice of counting blessings, that its deepest and most transformative dimension often remains hidden behind the simplified version that is disseminated, Genuine gratitude is not a positivity technique. It's not a mental trick to ignore problems. It's not the act of listing the good to compensate for the bad and achieve a more favorable emotional balance. It's something qualitatively different and far more fundamental. It's the state in which perception operates from the abundance that already exists, instead of from the scarcity that is feared. It's the frequency from which reality is seen differently, not because reality has changed, but because the instrument of perception that registers it has changed. The difference between seeing life through gratitude and seeing it through complaint isn't the difference between someone who pretends everything is fine and someone who is honest about their difficulties. It's the difference between two differently calibrated instruments of perception that register the same territory and produce entirely different maps. One primarily registers what's missing, what threatens, what could go wrong. The other primarily registers what's there, what sustains, what's already working even if no one has celebrated it. Both perceive the same reality, but what they perceive more clearly produces experiential worlds that bear little resemblance to one another. Neuroscientists studying the effects of gratitude on the brain have documented changes that go far beyond the improved mood one might expect from a simple positivity technique. Sustained practice of genuine gratitude produces structural changes in brain regions associated with social emotions and well-being. It increases activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, associated with empathy and connection, reduces activity in the amygdala, associated with fear and reactivity, increases the production of dopamine and serotonin, improves sleep quality, strengthens the immune system, and, with consistent practice, produces a reconfiguration of the perceptual system that makes the state of gratitude progressively more accessible and automatic. In the context of night work, gratitude serves an additional function that goes beyond its documented benefits as a daytime practice. On the threshold of sleep, when the subconscious is at its most receptive, genuine gratitude produces precisely the biochemical and neurological state that maximizes the effectiveness of everything that follows. It reduces cortisol, which interferes with receptivity. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which fosters openness. It creates the heart coherence that researchers associate with greater intuition and increased plasticity of the belief system. It is, in practical terms, the optimal preparation of the ground before planting any seed. But there is a dimension of nighttime gratitude that has a specific power and that few practices explore in sufficient depth. Anticipatory gratitude. Not gratitude for what already exists, which is valuable and fundamental, but gratitude for what has not yet arrived in the physical world, but is already inhabited as real in the subconscious mind. When the emotion of gratitude can be genuinely activated for a reality that has not yet manifested externally. When the system can feel the gratitude of someone who already possesses what they desire, before it even appears in the physical world, something in the mechanics of transformation shifts profoundly. Because this anticipatory gratitude does exactly what the subconscious needs to register the new reality as possible and imminent. It presents the emotional experience of it before the material experience arrives. And the subconscious, which operates from experience rather than information, responds to this emotional experience with the same force with which it would respond to the physical experience. It's not manipulation of the universe, it's advanced communication with the system that constructs reality from within. It's the farmer who gives thanks for the harvest while still sowing, not because he's naive about the work ahead, but because he has enough faith in the process to already experience the emotion of the outcome. This trust, expressed as gratitude before any external evidence justifies it, is one of the most sophisticated and effective forms of subconscious programming. It combines, in a single state, the emotion of the outcome, the signal of security to the nervous system, the frequency of abundance, and the trusting surrender that allows the process to operate without the interference of anxious attachment. The quantum portal that gratitude opens is not a metaphor, even though it may sound like one. It is the opening of the perceptual system to a wider frequency band, where possibilities and connections become visible that are literally imperceptible from a place of fear and scarcity. People who operate from deep and genuine gratitude are not luckier than others. Their perception is calibrated to register what others don't see because their perceptual instrument is tuned to a different frequency. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, practice gratitude in its two dimensions. First, gratitude for what already is, for what had value today, for what your body did without your asking, for what the people in your life represent, even if you sometimes forget it. And then, when that gratitude is genuine and the system has opened up from it, anticipatory gratitude for what you are building, for the life that already exists at the inner level where all reality begins, for the transformation that is already happening, even if it is not yet fully visible in the outer world. Feel that gratitude in your chest. Let it expand and sleep from that place. That feeling you have is the portal, and on the other side is what you are building. I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you'd like to take it a step further and elevate this to another level, don't forget to check out the first link in the description. You'll find even more content, exercises, and tools there that can transform your path. I'll see you inside.